All right, we're back. Another week, another 7 days of crazy stuff happening. How are you doing today, Hominis?
Not bad, man. Not bad. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm good. I went to the rock climbing gym again. Well, I mean, I'm going every week on Mondays, so basically every time we stream, I'm be like, I went to the rock climbing gym this morning. But yeah, it's a good workout, man. It's especially up in the forearms. Like I've done different kinds of sports and weight training and stuff in the past, but like the forearm workout and like the hand like grip workout that you get from rock climbing is crazy.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. I used to go every once in a while. I didn't do it, seriously or anything like that. But it's definitely a lot of fun. And yeah, you're sore in places.
You're like, well,
after.
yeah, like if your fingers, like just you're gripping onto stuff, like keeping yourself on the wall with your just fingers. You feel that, uh, afterwards. You're like, I've never had a finger workout before. This is new to me. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'd also picked up my bike from the bike shop. I was getting a tune up for it, getting like the brakes adjusted and all that stuff. So now I got it back, and that's nice because it's what I'm using to travel around since the state wants to fuck me on the registration issue. I think I've explained it before.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm just using that as a primary mode of transport now because I really only have to go like 10-15 miles around my area to really get what I need done.
Yeah, nothing crazy.
Yeah, so that's enough for the e-bike. I can usually take that around, and it has that amount of range.
Yeah. My poor car is actually in the shop. They did I didn't know about this, but I got to find out like really, really early in the morning. I parked my car, and when I parked it, instead of shifting into park, the transmission cable disconnected. So like the cable that runs from your actual shifter, like all the way up to your transmission, disconnected, and it was as I was turning the car off. So it thought that it was in reverse. The car was turned off, so I can't start the car because car's in reverse. It's not gonna let you start the car. But I also couldn't turn the car off or take my key out or move it or do anything else. So I had to disconnect the battery.
What in the world?
And I could have fixed it if it hadn't been at like, I don't know. It's probably about 1 a.m. once I finally got everything taken care of. But it was like 11:30 midnight, somewhere around there. So I had to get it towed and get it fixed. But the good news is it'll be fixed for free because it was it's actually a recall that I never found out about. They never sent me any paperwork or anything for. All the way back in 2019, there was a big recall because of that particular part breaking on actually quite a lot of cars. So I got lucky. Some people that I was poking around trying to figure out what happened, and found like dozens of people describing my exact issue. And so I went and looked it up, and yeah, it turns out that that a lot of people were having that problem. Some people were having the issue while they were driving. They hit a bump.
Oh shit!
And like the whole transmission disconnected, and they couldn't shift out of drive. So that was fun.
Oh, fuck. Yeah.
I got lucky that I was in my driveway when it happened. So.
Yeah. I mean, fucking thank fuck for that.
Yeah, exciting. That could be a lot worse. Into the week, but it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah. No, well, I'm glad you're okay with that. And I mean, that sucks that you had to go through it, but at least it doesn't cost you nothing.
Yeah, it sucks, but it'll be taken care of, and then after that, I'll be fine. I won't have to worry about my car just not shifting gears all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's kind of a big thing, right? It should be important. Yeah. So yeah, we should move on to the topics of today. And the first one, let me transition over to the live screen here, is Dave Chappelle getting attacked at some live show with Hollywood Bowl. Dude, how a guy gets onto the stage with a Hollywood Bowl, like, holy shit. I've seen like nightclubs with better fucking security than this sort of fucking place. I mean, the dude got beat down afterwards. I don't know if you saw him getting wheeled out of there in the. He
was messed up.
His arm was going the wrong direction. You tell you what.
Completely wrong direction. Yep.
And I don't really give a shit about the video or the article itself. Just sort of a backdrop for us to talk about the Dave Chappelle thing in general. I think everybody's seen the clip. It's like a second long. You see the guy fucking tackle him out, and then Dave Chappelle says that was a trans man, and then fucking what is it? Chris Rock. Was it Chris Rock? Who the fuck? Chris, yeah, right. And he was all like, "Was that Jamie Foxx? Or no, was that freaking who are these people anymore? Will Smith. Yeah, there you go." And so it was fun. But the thing is that everybody who cares about free speech or cares about like free expression in a general sense saw this coming with the Will Smith thing. It's like, okay, you think it's hilarious that Will Smith goes up and slaps his friend Chris Rock over a joke, but like people are gonna like take this to heart. They're gonna take this sort of sentiment and like run with it and be like, look, we did it to fucking Chris Rock over the fucking making fun of a woman. Well, how about we do it to Dave Chappelle for making fun of the gays and the transes and stuff? And how about we do it to this fucking like they started making lists on Twitter and stuff of the people that like had their shit coming, and it was very predictable. These people think that like violence, well, they think that words are violence, right? They always preach that like words are violence. Even silence is violence. Not saying words is violence. So, they have no problem with metering out violence to things that they perceive as being violent in nature, even though they clearly fucking aren't.
Yeah, just the act of not agreeing with him 9 times out of 10, or not accepting their identity is violence according to them. You're erasing their identity. It's like, well, if it's as fucking simple as me simply not accepting it, then how the fuck is that a real identity in the first place? Shouldn't it be more important that you accept it, you believe it? Doesn't fucking matter if anybody else, or it shouldn't, but that's the catch, isn't it? It's not about that. It's about validation.
Yeah, and I just never understood this whole like massaging of words to coddle the minorities attitude that's been had for so long. Because I mean, I'm a brown guy. I'm a Latino man. I grew up speaking Spanish in my home. I was even home. I was a single mother. Was at my home. Right. I was raised by a single mother, child of divorce. I get all sorts of oppression points. Not a woman. I could say I'm a woman. I guess then I'll get some oppression points there. But
apparently very easily now, I mean, it doesn't take much.
But I got a couple of them. I got some oppression points, not all of them. But like when I was in like high school and the concept of affirmative action was explained to me, I was like, well, that's ridiculous, right? Because I went to school with white people, I went to school with black people, went to school with Asian people, and I was smarter than a lot of the white people and the Asian people. And some of the Asian people got better grades because they worked their asses off way harder than I did. I did not give a shit about school. I was more. I loved smoking weed and hanging out with my buddies, playing guitar, playing punk music, like doing backyard shows. And that's what I cared about.
Priorities.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's not like I understood what was going on in my classrooms. Like that shit. Like I was as intelligent as those other guys, which was shown by my fucking standardized test scores, which were usually in the above the 90th percentile. In the area. And then it got explained to me, it's like, well, you don't actually have to get good grades in your standardized tests and your ACTs and SATs. You don't actually need good grades to get to the same spot that the white kids are, like their requirements. We don't expect as much from you. And I'm like, well, why the fuck not?
Yeah.
Like, well, the thing is you're oppressed, and so we expect you to be dumber than those white kids who have all these advantages. I'm like, well, I mean, I'm going to school with white kids, so I don't really understand their advantages. A lot of them had 2-parent households, so I guess that's an advantage. But a lot of, my Hispanic brothers and black brothers and all of them had 2-parent households. The ones that did a lot better. I had a buddy of mine who grew up like fucking down the street from me, but his 2 parents were together, and he went to college right out of high school, and he got a degree, and he got a job as a fucking, accountant. And like, so, that was all possible for me to do as well. That was possible for anybody who grew up in our neighborhood to do. It's just, I didn't feel like doing that shit. And I went, a couple of different routes, which involved breaking more laws. And as a result, I did not get a nice job as fucking accountant or whatever the fuck, and that had nothing to do with me, the color of my skin, because we had the same skin color. But for some reason, yeah, there was, affirmative action was explained to us like, yo, we don't expect you to be as smart as these white kids, and that's us being nice to you. And I was like, what? No, that's fucking ridiculous.
That's kind of fucked up a little bit, don't you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, it reminds me of that one. Just the general attitude about voter ID laws, which I mean, I don't even give a fuck about voting or care that voting is useful, but there's this screeching from the left that voter ID laws are racist because we can't expect black people to be able to get IDs, which is just like one of the easiest fucking things to do in life. Like there's fucking DMVs everywhere. You just go right down. Get a fucking fill out a form and get an ID. Like black people work at the DMV. I don't understand how we can't expect to and this is not, it's not even like the whole of all of the population of black adults or white adults, because it's like the voting population is actually much smaller than like the general adult population. And so the
Right.
people who care about voting and who consider themselves informed enough to vote and motivated like politically enough to go out and vote, like I think if you've gotten that far, you can also get yourself a fucking driver's license.
You could definitely get
Like
yourself a driver's
black people like to drive, black people like to buy alcohol. Like I don't understand why they wouldn't know how to get an ID, but apparently this is a really big issue for the left, is like we got to oppose the racist voter ID laws.
It's, I mean, on its face, it's kind of, it's ridiculous. It doesn't make sense if you think about it for 2 seconds. But the point is not to have you think about it. It's to have people who already believe this shit like knee jerk into
What's so they have their NBC talking point?
Yeah,
They got the line.
right. It's just to get them to knee jerk into repeating it. It has no basis in fact whatsoever.
Yeah, hold on. I gotta close my door because I know my roommate's gonna come home soon, and I don't want her coming and talking to me. Okay. And I'm back at DTM. People actually do work at your local DMV. I mean, yeah, it's usually the people who live around in the area. And if it's a poor area, well, then you're gonna have the demographics that make up that area working there. And yeah, in my town, it's a bunch of Mexicans and Hispanic people in general, and in the black neighborhoods, you got a bunch of black people working at the DMV. And that's just how it works. And everybody knows how to get ID. It's not a big fucking mystery. But the crazy news, right? The big news is Roe versus Wade, apparently being overturned, and it is. I thought I highlight an email that Tom Woods in his like email mailing list sent out, where he talks about basically the opinion of like leftist, like Democrat, like legal scholars from back at the time when Roe versus Wade was decided. And so these are like pro-choice people who were also like lawyers and stuff that were examining the arguments that made Roe versus Wade pass, or that were contained within the ruling of Roe versus Wade. And so I thought it would be an interesting point of view of it, because everybody's just kind of talking about their own goals for how they want Roe versus Wade to be decided, or the abortion issue to be decided. So the anti-abortion people are like, yeah, Roe versus Wade overturned because we hate abortion. And then the pro-abortion people are like, damn, we didn't want Roe versus Wade overturned, and this is terrible because we want abortion. And so it's just the end goals that's kind of deciding how people should feel about it. And personally, I mean, I actually never considered myself pro-life, like in that, like I never really did any like pro-life like advocacy, right? Like I was never a thing that I argued about on the internet, or that I even really it really focused myself on. Early in life, I would have considered myself pro-choice, but I also argued it from the standpoint of like, not this whole like late term abortion business, and not like, just for any fucking reason whatsoever. I was more like looking at like those heartbeat bills that seemed pro choice to me, right? It was that like you could like that life did not begin at conception, but it more began like if you can, find a heartbeat in a nervous system. That seemed to be me pretty rational. Like if you aborted before that point, then I was like, I could see the argument there. And
Right.
but then like now that's considered like an anti-choice position, that the recent heartbeat bills that were passed were considered like as abridgments of women's rights, that they couldn't kill a child with a heartbeat in the womb. And so that seemed to be really weird to me, that like I was considered pro-choice back in high school for like putting that position forward in a debate over whether life began at conception, because obviously that's not conception. That's a little bit after conception, probably a couple months after conception. So that seemed to me like a pro-choice argument back then. But so that's how I've kind of changed over the years, is that like I was considered kind of pro-choice, but now I would consider myself more pro-life. One, obviously, from the natural rights perspective, is that human rights belong to all humans. We find a human life within the mother's womb, especially one that we can guarantee will be a human life predictably in 9 months. Right?
Yeah, and I mean that's a pretty decent argument, honestly, because I'm personally I've kind of bounced back and forth. I'm a little ambivalent about the whole issue, but like I do listen to both sides of the argument, because you've got good points here and there on both sides, but that is definitely one of the good ones. Like it's sure never going to be anything but a human being. Like it's not going to be a tree or a fucking dog or anything else. Like it's going to be a human being. If it survives, it'll be a human being, and you can't say that it won't be.
Yeah, and also, I mean, for me personally, being a vegan, it's really kind of interesting to me that the vegan community itself isn't more like have more pro-life people in it, and
That
that
is shocking.
and it's largely considered to be like a pro-choice, area, that like because it's a largely left-wing population of
Right.
people who are vegan, and so they like knee-jerk also just are pro-choice. But when I think about it, I'm like, well, veganism is pro-life. Like that's literally our mantra. Like it's embaked within our mantra is to be pro-life. We're pro-animal life, and humans are animals. I mean, if we care, like, and this whole argument about viability or like perception of pain or this whole stuff, it's like, well, I mean, if we care about motherfucking shrimp and honeybees, which have literally a hive mind, like it's literally a hive mind. That is they don't have like sense of individuality the same way that not even most mammals have, right? Their sense of like sentience and self-identity is very different from how we would think of it, but still we care about their suffering and how they're treated. And this is even potential harm, right? Because bees can be like honey can be harvested in a way that's harmful to the bees and to the hive, but it usually isn't in the interest of most bee farmers to do it that way, because they want to keep their bee populations healthy and producing honey ongoing. They don't want to kill the bees and fuck up the production of that. And so
Right.
even honey is sort of a thing that's like, yeah, you can kind of be consistent and be like, I don't want to cause harm, so I'm just going to be on the safe side and not consume some honey. But really, it's like this is like a really really specific ass thing that you shouldn't care that much about. I mean, sure, be consistent. Okay, we'll do with the honey, but then to be like, but also a fucking a fetus that's been forming for 3 months that's definitely going to be a little baby in another 6 months. Fuck that guy. Like like what? I like that doesn't fucking
It doesn't work.
that doesn't compute to me as a vegan. I'm like, okay, but we're pro-life, bro. Like that's what we're about. And so I don't understand how we could just ignore human babies being slaughtered en masse. But I'm not gonna have shrimp or like shellfish that doesn't have a central nervous system. Like what the fuck?
Listen, you know what it boils down to is that ideological consistency is it's not cool. So we just don't do it.
Yeah, well, people just get their like end opinions, and then they kind of like backwards justify them. And like I try to reason this shit
Absolutely.
out, man. Whenever anybody explains some shit to me, I'm like, okay, explain the logic to me. Come on, let me hear how you reason this out. And then I do it for myself. I go, okay, but what the fuck you said here doesn't make sense here, and then I think of things this way and that way. And like, you know, it's just, I don't know, it's just weird to like.
I will admit, I had the exact same issue with what's a good example? Border, you know, people coming across the border and all this other stuff. And the more I thought about it, and the more I considered the fact that I don't even think that a state should exist. Therefore, really, the only borders you're looking at are people's personal property. Um, the more I realized that the only real reason that I would even have an issue with any sort of immigration at all is, you know, in the standpoint of like people crossing like us, like a country's border, is, I mean, they wouldn't cause any problems if we didn't have these massive social safety nets that people pay all these taxes and shit into, that are, you know, necessary in order to take care of these people. Like if those didn't exist, I wouldn't care. Some guy wants to walk across the border from Mexico and get a job. Who cares?
Yeah, and especially consider that like these like sort of protections for the illegal immigrants also are used by criminals who cross the border and who live lives of crime. And like this is not like some racist fucking dog whistle meme that like the right wingers made up. Like I am a Latino, Southern California, surrounded by Mexicans, surrounded by other Latinos, and like you talk to people about fucking MS-13, La Mala Salvatrucha, and like these fucking gangsters that like live like in a city over from where I live, and that's, you know, where I grew up in and shit. And it's like, yeah, these fucking dudes suck. Like hello, like just like I would like them not to just have fucking like when I went to jail over a fucking weed charge back in 2007 2008, like there was two cars, the two gangs of Latinos. There was the Sureños, which were dudes like me who were basically Latino Americans, and then there was the Paisas, which was just an entire population of native, you know, of like Mexican born, Central American born dudes in fucking jail with us. It's like there's enough of them committing crimes that they literally make up their own section of Latino gang. So like you can't like, you know, talk to people like me who grew up next to the fucking Mexican border and like be like, yeah, there's no fucking gang problem coming over the border. That's just a fucking right-wing scaremongering, you know, racist dog whistle. That's fucking don't fly here, dude. That's complete bullshit. Latino gangs, Mexican gangs, Guatemalan gangs, fucking MS-13, all those dudes are fucking real. They're a real fucking problem. And like the degree to which sanctuary cities and liberal cities go to overlook their crimes and to like the court system will like downgrade their charges and like not deport them when they should be, because you know, it's like that shit goes on and it is a danger to the Latino communities in the area, more so than anybody else, because we have to fucking live with those assholes. So,
right.
So yeah. But Roe versus Wade, yes. With the actual the email that I was gonna look at. So yeah, this is Tom Woods. If you're not familiar with him, he's a libertarian guy. He's wrote a couple of books on different topics. I think he has one called Meltdown, which is on the 2008 financial crash and how that was tied to government programs, as it always is. But yeah, he's got a great mailing list where he talks about a bunch of different shit. I think I've shown some of his like the COVID charts on like mask mandates and things like that. But yeah, today he's talking about Roe versus Wade. He says, you've surely heard that a Supreme Court decision overturning Roe versus Wade has been leaked to the public. Let me say from the outset, nothing is more certain than a stream of outraged emails about this issue of my newsletter. But I trust my readers wouldn't want me to say something I didn't believe just because I thought it's what they wanted to hear. The leaked decision has Samuel Alito declaring that the legal reasoning in Roe was, quote, exceptionally weak, unquote. Of course, the, quote, trust in government science and 15 days to stop the spread, and here's my Ukrainian flag, even though I haven't given a rat's behind about any other war for the past 20 years. People are projectively registering their outrage over such a statement. But Alito's statement isn't even debatable. In fact, legal scholars at the time and over the years, despite generally favoring abortion themselves, have been known to admit that the legal reasoning in Roe was flimsy to non-existent. And so I think this is an important angle to take, is that, like, listen, we just have to look, like, if we're gonna, if you want to defend abortion or abortion rights, and you want to, legalize that sort of thing for the American public, then, well, there has to be a legal reasoning within the Constitution that justifies it. At least if we're gonna go through this fucking system that is set up. And if you're gonna be outraged about this thing being overturned, then, like, you have to give a reason why this decision should not have been overturned, not just because, like, a reason why you think abortion should be, legal or available in general, because this is an issue of a particular Supreme Court case, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
well,
so anyway,
what's getting some people a little, like, I guess, confused is that they are arguing about this as if it determines the overall legality in the whole country, and it really it doesn't.
Yeah, they're acting like this makes abortion illegal.
Yeah, it just transfers the decision back to the states. It does not, like, it's literally just saying, look, because this isn't something enumerated in the Constitution, there's no reason for there to be a federal protection for it. Like, there's nothing stating that this is a right that the federal government should have to protect it. It should be up to the states to decide, and everybody's flipping their shit like it's immediately overnight going to become, illegal because Roe versus Wade gets overturned in the Supreme Court. And, like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, and part of it is because of the whole like horror nightmare situation that the left has concocted about what could happen should abortion become criminalized in even a state or two, right? They're like, but the people, in Texas, we're gonna have to, fucking get, coat hangers and shit, and it's like, this is
they're gonna turn the women into brood mares.
Oh my god, the whole, like, again, being from California, I'm kind of in the trenches so far as, like, these, like, leftist NPC narrative goes, and I have seen, like, oh my god, have you seen the Handmaid's Tale? It's, like, so coming and true, like, it's so relevant to today now, and I'm just like, really, is it fucking really? I really don't fucking think so, bro. But anyways, this email continues. Thus, in 1973, the very year of that fateful decision, John Hart Ely, himself sympathetic to abortion, attacked the court's legal reasoning in the Yale Law Review, arguing that the legal rationale for the decision was simply made up. Roe, he wrote, is, quote, bad because it is bad constitutional law, or rather because it is not constitutional law and gives almost no sense of obligation to try to be, end quote. Jeffrey R. Stone, who was a law clerk to Justice William Brennan, at the time later admitted, quote, everyone in the Supreme Court, all the justices, all the law clerks knew it was legislative or arbitrary, end quote. According to Edward Lazarus, who clerked for Roe's author, Justice Harry Blackmun, quote, as a matter of constitutional interpretation and judicial method, Roe borders on the indefensible. I say this as someone utterly committed to the right to choose, as someone who believes such a right has grounding elsewhere in the Constitution instead of where Roe placed it, and as someone who loved Roe's author like a grandfather. What exactly is the problem with Roe? The problem, I believe, is that it has little connection to the constitutional right it purportedly interpreted. A constitutional right to privacy broad enough to include abortion has no meaningful foundation in constitutional text, history, or precedent. The proof in Roe's failings comes not from the writings of those unsympathetic to women's rights, but from the decision itself and the friends who have tried to sustain it. Justice Blackmun's opinion provides essentially no reasoning in support of its holding, and in the almost 30 years since Roe's announcement, no one has produced a convincing defense of Roe on its own terms. And so, yeah, that seems
pretty. That's pretty damning.
Yeah, because it's just sticking to this idea of the legal grounding and the legal arguments and where they have merit and where they don't, and where Roe placed it fucking doesn't. And so it, like, as a people who would be interested in seeing abortion rights preserved or expanded, I think that they have a good, interest in maybe finding a good legal standing in order to sustain that right. Because if they don't, then something like this can come along, which it obviously fucking did.
And in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I don't have any solid evidence besides how I feel things have gone. Um, at any point, if they could have uh, written some kind of bill to actually protect abortion rights in the United States, they would have. And this just kind of further entrenches that belief. Hearing this particular criticism, is that there's no foundation for them to even try to do it. That's why they haven't done it. And on top of that, they've kind of used it as this every time there's an election, every time there's a midterm, they dangle it over the fire. Roe versus Wade is in trouble. If you don't vote for us, they're going to get rid of abortion rights and all this other shit. They don't protect it because it's the perfect target for them to get people to vote who otherwise would not have bothered.
Yeah, and this is a perfect thing to happen during like a Democratic administration, months before the midterm election.
Oh yeah, the timing is fucking uncanny, and honestly, I'm not there. There's no way you're gonna convince me that it wasn't on purpose. Like, they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, this last bit is also kind of telling as well. So it continues. Even Yale's Harold Coe, who clerked for Blackmun, was reduced to saying, "I'd rather have Blackmun who uses the wrong reasoning in Roe to get the right results, and let other people figure out the right reasoning." In other words, Blackmun was full of it, but since I like the results, I guess the law, which I'm supposed to have devoted my life to, really doesn't matter. The United States is a federal system in which the central government has a few enumerated powers, with the rest reserved to the states. No authority to regulate abortion was ever delegated to the central government, so it remains with the states. All the convoluted legal reasoning in the world cannot evade this simple and exceptionally obvious fact. But as Robert Barnes said in his interview on the Tom Woods Show, that comes out this week. The law schools are churning out judges who pretend the law says whatever they need it to say in order to get the outcomes they want. Is that really the society you want? And yeah, that's the end of the article there. And it's true. I mean, you can see that in the lady, the new justice, right? I forgot her name.
Oh yeah. I can't even remember her fucking name, but she's I am not a biologist. The one that's not a biologist.
It's the K name, but yeah, well, you know, and so, you know, with her bad, like, you know, answer with the to respect to natural rights, right? And so you can see that they don't have grounding in the philosophical, like, roots of what justified the Constitution, why the Constitution was made. And so of course they're not going to defend you know, constitutionality on those grounds, which is, again, to be expected. Like, you put power within the hands of judges to interpret law, and oh my god, they don't interpret law to the letter and kind of use their own biases and instead mold it to whatever they want to accomplish into the world. That's a huge surprise that we could never predicted centralizing power into that area.
Probably the biggest joke is this idea that Supreme Court justices, despite the fact that they are elected from, you know, politicians who belong to parties, they are objective and impartial. And I mean, that's not fucking true of anyone, like, ever.
No. And
you can't be.
But we can't have anarchy because there's evil people out there who's going to exploit and corrupt and gain power unfavorably.
Yeah, like the warlords. What about the warlords?
And we saw what happened last week with the warlords in Somalia, which it turned out that they were actually contained pretty well compared to how it was during the socialist state of Somalia.
Yeah, because they weren't elected and then protected by the law. You know, ironically.
Yeah, and then one thing happened, of course, after that whole Roe versus Wade decision came about, was that supposedly horse pills are being recommended again. But Newsweek is here to let you know that this may be fact checked, right? Maybe it's not so true. Horse medicine being recommended for human abortions? And so they talk about first that, like, some people claimed that the drug, which has U.S. approval, for human use for more than 2 decades. They needed to point this out. Has
Oh
also
boy.
been used as an anti-ulcer medicine for horses. So social media users, they claim that this is the case, but we got to let you know it's approved for human usage.
So literally the exact same situation as
Well, hold on.
ivermectin?
They're going to point out the difference in the situations. They're going to make sure that
Oh,
they're going to make sure
okay.
that you know the differences, that this is not the same thing at all, actually. See, its dual use status has been led to parallels being drawn with another drug used on horses, ivermectin. Ivermectin used to treat parasites was hailed by some as a miracle. The quote miracle, right? I don't know which quote, place that they drew the quote of a miracle COVID-19 treatment for humans. Maybe some people did call it a miracle treatment. However, it just seemed like it was fairly safe and seemed to be effective in certain instances. I'm not going to really debate about the science of the trials and all that kind of shit. Maybe it was completely useless, but it was approved for human usage and it didn't seem to do anybody any harm, at least.
It
But
certainly wasn't giving them blood clots that made them stop being athletes forever.
yeah, yeah, there's blood clots and myocarditis and in like people in their 20s. It didn't seem to be that causing that, so I'd prefer that maybe over like a drug that was developed that same year. But what do we know? And so yeah, people are comparing the two drugs and the narrative surrounding them. And let me see here. Article published earlier this month discussed how misoprostol is used to treat ulcers in horses, claiming the drug would be relatively easy to acquire from veterinary sources in the form of a powder. And on this point, Vice comments on the similarity between acquiring misoprostol from veterinary sources and how ivermectin was purchased during the pandemic. Now, I think there were some reports of people using horse-based ivermectin, but for the most part, it was people going to their doctors. And
there were a few, and they were overly focused on. Like I think there were two that I actually heard of. There was only one high-profile one, and it actually turned out that I believe that something happened. Like her husband got really sick, but then it turned out she actually was trying to fucking like kill him. So that turned into a whole shit show. But yeah, there was like one or two that I heard of, but they were extremely focused on, of course. And that was it. Like those are the only two I heard of. I only heard of two. That was it. But people made it sound like it was like millions of people poisoning themselves with horse medicine, when the reality was a much smaller sample size.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, the administration of it there was a lot of the human version being administered by doctors. There was several like practices in various places along in the world that kind of continued to do like private trials of their own to see how effective it was, and it seemed to be at least relatively safe, and the people weren't having these terrible outcomes in COVID. Again, not gonna really pull up on the data on all that shit. It's around, and maybe it wasn't the a miracle cure for COVID or anything, but it doesn't seem to be fucking people up at the same time. But this Newsweek is about to give us the facts. See, this is the section. It's the facts. The facts are here. We got the facts from these guys. Misoprostol has been used since the 1970s to treat ulcers in humans. When it was first developed, its side effects on the pregnant uterus were already known. FDA approved its use in 2000. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved its use as part of an abortion medication regime first developed by French researchers during the 1980s. One of its current FDA entries shows it is used alongside another drug, mifeprex, to end a pregnancy through 70 days gestation. The drug regimen is a prescription-only, non-surgical termination method that the British Pregnancy Advisory Service describes as very safe with considerably fewer risks than continuing a pregnancy to term. And it can also be used to prevent ulcers caused in certain arthritis or pain medicines, including ulceration in horses. Its use is only approved as off-label. So basically, they're trying to make the case is like, listen, it was already an abortion drug, and the fact that it's a horse drug is only kind of partially approved as a horse drug, but it's off-label horse drug, but it's a human drug too. It's got approval in humans. And then they compare that with ivermectin. It was like there are aspects of the two medicines that make such a comparison misleading. Ivermectin is approved by the FDA to treat intestinal strongyloidiasis and onchocerciasis. I'm bad at this, but anyways, two conditions caused by parasitic worms, and they also approve some forms for animal ivermectin to prevent heartworm disease in certain parasites in horses, and that basically the evidence for it treating COVID is not complete. It's not as solid grounded in science and needs further testing. And some places found that they're no less likely to be hospitalized than those received a placebo. Again, calling it a COVID cure, quotations, but not really citing where they said that. Again, Joe Rogan saying that Joe Rogan claimed that it helped cure his own case when actually he was just listing off of all of the drugs that he used in his drug cocktail to treat COVID. It was part of it, but he didn't actually isolate ivermectin as being like the cure or or even having like a formative role in curing his in curing his COVID. And anyways, long story short, FDA did not approve it for treatment of COVID, even though it is approved in humans. And so this is a mostly false statement because so the statement originally, is horse medicine being recommended for human abortions? That was the question. And the ruling is mostly false because doctors do not prescribe horse medicine for abortions. Just like they don't prescribe ivermectin, horse ivermectin, for COVID.
Yeah.
And, it's been approved as an abortion drug since 2000, which makes it an abortion drug, human abortion drug. And it's not a horse drug because it's only an off-label horse drug. But the interesting bit again is that they even quoted it themselves, right? The article that started this whole chain of events was about how to get the fucking drug from veterinary sources.
Yeah. Not the human approved kind, but literally the fucking horse medicine.
Yeah, so this is they discuss how it's, even if it was not available for human abortions anymore, because in their world Roe versus Wade ended, abortions are now criminal, so this drug will no longer be available for human use in abortions. That's
right.
And so it will no longer, you can't, the idea, theoretically, it will no longer be approved by the FDA for treatment in humans if it's illegal to treat in humans, or maybe it's approved but illegal to use. Fuck it. But still, the article, and I have the article up here, right? It's DIY abortion pills with horse medicine. Yeah, let's say. And so yeah, and they even say that it's reminiscent of ivermectin because it's also used to treat horses, and use in horses made it easier for humans to get without a prescription. So,
right. But see, now that they've spent 2 years making a big stink about this, they got to get ahead of this shit and find some way to bait and switch the whole thing out. Actually, it's not horse medicine. We're telling you to get the horse medicine, but it's not horse medicine because it can also be used in humans. So this time it doesn't count as horse medicine because we like it, but the other one did count as horse medicine because we didn't like it. Basically what it works out to.
Well, okay, so they do have the grounding of it is approved for the thing we are advocating it be used for. But again, they're claiming that they're not being recommended horse medicine when it is literally they're advocating to source it from veterinary sources. So the horse medicine.
It would be the horse medicine. It would be the dosage for a horse too. That's the other thing, is you would still be talking about a bunch of people getting, a dose for a large barnyard animal and then having to figure out how to dose it out for themselves.
Yeah.
Which is just what they were making fun of people for when they were taking horse paste.
And,
I mean,
I feel like even today, like, it wouldn't be FDA approved to do that shit, like, on your own. It's available by prescription from a fucking doctor.
right.
And so it's just this
Still
whole
something you have to go through.
argument. I mean, my opinion, the FDA should be fucking ended altogether. You know, it shouldn't exist at all because it's actually done a lot of harm for people in the world, and that's another fucking conversation entirely. But you know, for these people who want to be like, ivermectin is not approved, you know, as a COVID thing, and it's a horse drug, and then to turn around and have this sort of attitude, and especially Newsweek to be like, well, no, it's not really a horse drug because it's a human abortion drug, but also if you get it, we're looking at an article that tells you to get it from a veterinary source, but it's not a horse. Like, fucking stop, just stop lying, just stop fucking lying about this shit. Okay, like we're not.
We can't do that. I mean, I don't think it's possible.
Just we're not that fucking dumb. Yeah. So this was just amazing to behold, where like Newsweek was bending over backwards to somehow justify it here or there, also tie it back to ivermectin, explain that it's different from ivermectin. Meanwhile, these motherfuckers are going, get it from horse doctors. Fuck it. You know, who cares?
Of course.
And in the least surprising news of the week, CDC bought cell phone data to track the vaccination lockdown compliance. Report says.
Look at that.
And you know, all of us crazy conspiracy theorists who were like, listen, these fucking people with their cell phone tracking and you know, they're giving it to the government and they're using it for nefarious shit. It's like, they're like, hey, put your tinfoil hat on. Fucking, what are you talking about? This is crazy talk. And I mean, again, this is the least surprising news of the week, I think. It's like, oh, the CDC.
It's crazy. It's like, I've never been this right this many times in this short span of a time.
And honestly, it's like I'm fucking half asleep and fully high when I'm making these predictions. It's not even that hard. This is just don't trust the government 101.
I mean, basically, which, you know, bizarrely the more, you know, left-wing people used to be all about until about 2016.
No, 2008 started it too. You know, I'd say it started in the Obama years. Because the dude had swag, you know, he could fucking just rattle off. We tortured some folks. We got to bring it up like every fucking week, I think. But like, come on, that's a fucking amazing line that everybody sort of just glossed over. For, you know, that should have been like epically, like, you know, fucking news everywhere. It should. Obama says we tortured some folks, and yeah, I know right wingers were all over it, but everybody was like, yeah, those right wingers blowing shit out of proportion. It's like, dude, you're getting right wingers to talk about torture like it's bad. Say, run with it. Let's go. Like, is this not the nonpartisan, like the bipartisan issue that we can all get behind? Is that war is shitty and torture is shitty? Let's fucking do it, guys. And the left, you know, the anti-war movement on the left got relegated to crazy conspiracy people in like the gray zone and like antiwar.com and shit, where, you know, they're still writing articles and stuff, but like nobody pays attention to what the fuck they're doing. Everybody considers, you know, like, who the fuck was it? Oh god, I think I pulled up the article last week, right, where somebody was like was trying to categorize like gray zone and them as like being like dangerous to the government or some shit. I forgot the article.
Yeah.
We looked at the article.
Yeah, they were was it a disinformation thing, or was it just like they were trying to label it as like extremist content?
Yeah, I think it was like the extremist content angle, but yeah, so this is and that's where the anti-war left is now, is that they were pushed down to like the fucking underbelly of the Democratic, or not even the Democratic movement, but of the left-wing movement. And you know, it's just an amazing thing, because like once Obama came about and you know, I started looking at this stuff and I was like, yeah, this guy's got the same fucking policies, is expanding wars, he's paying lip service to like, you know, social issues, but at the same time, He's sending these same, groups of people to go off and die for like the most bullshit fucking reasons. And then then I started learning about like the whole history of the War on Terror, like with the Scott Horton content and stuff. And I was fucking shocked. Like that shit is wild, right? You know that like the America is this like warmongering, like, imperialistic nation in a certain sense, right? But it also seems a little overblown, like, and like it seems like, yeah, maybe but like it's not happening that much nowadays. And then you like look at like fucking everything that went on in the 80s. It's like, yeah, we were friendly with Saddam.
It's understated.
It's understated to like a fucking ton. Like our role with Saddam, and then we went out in Afghanistan, and then like fucking Iraq and Syria, all this stuff. It's like we've been meddling and fucking. We've not only had like our finger in the pies, but like we just been squishing them fingers in the pie. Like just fucking mixing it all up like some little boy who doesn't know shit about like.
What was the dude in Scary Movie with the gimpy hand and the mashed potatoes?
Exactly. They've been doing that shit for fucking 40 years. More than 40 years, since the 70s.
At least, yeah.
And so, once you have that context for like foreign policy and world events, it's just, I don't know, man. It's so hard to take these motherfuckers seriously. And it's just, it's honestly hard to start with people, because then you're like, okay, it's like, well, why are you so like distrustful, or why do you have such a cynical view of like America? Why are you so anti-American in your outlook? It's like, brother, I can't explain 40 plus 50 years of history to you right now.
How much time do you have? Because it's like we're gonna have to sit down and have like a chat.
Yeah. It's like, so let me tell you about how ISIS formed. Wait, no, hold on a second. Let me tell you about how Al Qaeda was able to propagate in the Middle East during the middle 2000s. Wait, no, let me tell you about why they attacked us on 9/11. No, wait, let me tell you about Saddam Hussein and how he was goaded into war and backed up, but also antagonized at this. No, wait, let me tell you about Iran Contra. And no, wait, let me tell you, like, it's like, how fucking much do I need to discuss with you about this shit? It's nuts. And this is coming from like people like you and I, who like, we have a very cursory and not very well detailed understanding of this history. I'm not a fucking expert on the wars in the Middle East. I've just been scratching the surface of like the timeline of events and the points. Once you get down into the actual fucking nitty gritty of all of the faction wars and corruption that's been going on, it's just so wild that it fucking boggles the mind. I remember reading Fool's Errand by Scott Horton, which is just about Afghanistan only. Enough already is one on the entirety of the War on Terror, but just like, I was fucking livid, bro. The fucking shit that went on during the Afghan War, which again, it's like, yeah, it had its roots in the funding of the Mujahideen and the start of Al Qaeda, but it didn't really get ramped up until the 90s, and then the War on Terror in 2000. And even just going back 20 years, like the shit that happened between then and now is fucking disgusting, bro. Like, why is war not a bigger concern for people, like as like a voting bloc or just as a political bloc? Like war seems to be one of the most horrible things that could happen in the world today. Like, people die by like the fucking thousands, by the millions. It seems a big deal.
It's not happening here. It's not happening here. It's we're completely removed from all of it. You watch violence on the television, you're not actually experiencing it. And like a lot of people, I mean, I hate to say it, like a lot of people live in very stable first world countries. So it's not happening here, so it doesn't affect them.
Yeah, I'm reminded of when I was discussing this, I think it was like 2 years ago, with my then roommate. Well, I had two roommates at the time, and they were both fucking kids. They were like 21. And I was talking to them about Joe Biden, because I think that was well, yeah, it was 2 years ago, so the election was just, you know, kind of getting underway, happening too. And I was talking to them about Joe Biden's history with the war in Iraq, and you know, what's going on in Yemen, and Obama's expansion of the wars and all that. And one of them just was with this one was like, well, yeah, but I feel like wars is kind of just this ongoing thing that sort of stays the same and doesn't change. But like, you know, fucking transgenders in the military, that's important. And also, you know, this and that's like, dude, like, are you fucking like, you more care about a trans person's right to go fucking die for some bullshit ass reason than the bullshit ass reason in the first, like, why are you so adamant that like there be trans power in the drone bombings? How is that concerning? How's the drone bombing is not concerning? You're like, oh, it's something that we're just gonna have to live with. But if a trans person can't do it, if a trans person can't commit war crimes, then we got an issue here. We gotta make sure trans people commit war crimes and gay people commit war crimes. Everybody should have an equal chance to commit some war crimes, to torture some folks if they need to, you know. Let trans torture. Is this gonna get us fucking a strike? I don't know, but it seemed such a bizarre ranking of priorities.
We want to know if the CIA spooks that black bag you and throw you in a van are diverse.
If they got, you know, if they can fucking, what was it? Gatekeep gaslight girl boss. As long as like, can we put a gatekeep gaslight girl boss sign in the CIA lobby? I would like that very much, please.
When I get black bagged, can I request that I am waterboarded by the non-binary CIA agent? You know, it would make me feel more comfortable.
Yeah, so they're gonna come up with a new initiative in general, just CIA's new program, diversity in torture. And so yeah, CDC tracks us. Government is terrible. The water is wet.
On it's a little funny on its face if you think about it, because it's like, okay, they're worried about making like how does that translate to? I mean, does that carry over to the people that they're torturing? Like, we're gonna rip this guy's fingernails off, but don't fucking misgender him, because that would be bad. Like,
yeah.
I mean, how do you like what? How is this fucking? I don't get it.
Yeah, it don't make no sense. And actually, we forgot one important memorial that we need to commemorate, or what's the word? We gotta say a prayer, or like, you know, what is it? Pour one out for the death. Hold on a second. Let me make sure I get this. The death of birthing people.
Oh yeah.
Rip birthing people. You know, you were with us for a very short time, but men can't get pregnant. It's a women's issue now. It's about.
Yeah, I was mildly shocked to see the return to that language when they were like, "Listen, if men could get pregnant," and I'm like, "Dude, like a week ago, you said they could."
Yeah, there was didn't we even see this one person who was like, I'm a, you know, trans woman who's got dysphoria, but also I want to get pregnant, but then like get an abortion before I have the baby because that makes me feel better. And oh boy, that's a fucking take.
They want to be able to get an abortion so that if the dysphoria caused by the fact that they are a pregnant man, well, according to them, a pregnant man, gets to be too much, that they can then, you know, abort themselves out of
the situation.
Dysphoric hell is what they called it. And I'm like, man, it's got to be stunning to just wake up every day and be that fucked up in the head. I just don't. Good God.
Know more about vaccinations, other than the CDC tracking us to make sure that we did it all right and locked down right, is CDC, or no, what was it? The J&J vaccine. the FDA limited its use, so we'll look at a short. Good Morning America. Was it Good Morning America? Yeah, it's Good Morning America. I don't know. I chose like one of the first places I can find that just was going to talk about the thing itself, you know, the story itself.
So, Jen, we actually have a headline, some medical news here regarding the FDA's decision to severely limit who can get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine based on blood clots.
Blood clots, right. And file this one under we are still learning more and more about this virus and how these vaccines work. So as we learn more, we remain flexible and adapt and pivot our recommendations. And this is a perfect example of that. This decision follows what the FDA is referring to as further analysis of these rare blood clot concerns. Who does this apply to? Their new recommendation only for people 18 of age and older who can't get access to the mRNA vaccine for some reason. So they have had the J&J vaccine. The officials are saying that the risk of blood clots is extremely rare, but in medicine, we always are balancing risk versus benefit, and the mRNA vaccines do present safer options, specifically when you're talking about this rare risk of blood clots. And, you know, a lot of people fell into the J&J vaccine category. 17 million approximately got this vaccine. I want to be crystal clear. This risk of blood clots is really in the immediate days or weeks after being vaccinated. So if you got that vaccine months or over a year ago, nothing for you to worry about. But again, in the future, you're talking about.
Yeah, but also the vaccine protection has now waned as well. So not only are you out of the risk, you know, time frame for the blood clot, but you're also just not even helped out by the vaccine anymore because it don't work after a couple months.
You should be re-inoculated at some point. So it's like, all right, so this is still an issue for, you know, who the fuck ever.
Yeah, I think the J&J vaccine was the one that was one shot. I don't remember, but either way, yeah, they recommend the boosters after the fact, and there's still the issue of like the Pfizer vaccine was like we saw last week in the study that came out. Pfizer vaccine was associated with an increase in myocarditis. The Moderna vaccine was associated with an increase in myocarditis that was even like 7 or 8 times higher than that in the fucking Pfizer vaccine. Like there's so many fucking issues that are coming about, and then the actual results themselves have not been like that decidedly stellar for the vaccine crowd over the non-vaccine crowd, which we should have seen, right? We should have seen like this incredible branching between the results of the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. And all of the statistical comparisons that I have seen on comparing vaccinated and unvaccinated just do this as like a general category between the two, right? But there's differences in the groups of vaccinated and the unvaccinated outside of the fact that they did or did not get the vaccine. What I mean is that like the type of people who have gotten vaccinated and the type of people who have not gotten vaccinated have general differences in their temperament, the things that they allow themselves to do or don't do. You know, even things like the average age that could affect, you know, things differently. And so there's not like age adjusted numbers on this sort of thing. There's not what they call multivariate, you know, analyses of these things. They just look at one variable, a univariate analysis. Did you get the vaccine? Did you get did you not get the vaccine? The differences between those two groups, and then they attribute the differences to the vaccine or not getting the vaccine without adjusting for any other kind of factors that might have also affected outcomes in any kind of way. And this is something that like the whole fucking listen to science crowd doesn't fucking understand, is that you can point to a study that compares 2 data points and then connects 2 other data points, but that doesn't mean causation is proved there. And you know, there's a whole, you know, obviously everybody knows the correlation doesn't equal causation, but they don't understand of like what other factors could I possibly consider within this situation that could confound the correlation.
Right.
And that's where I don't think they really think things through. And that's why, you know, you see the same mistake being made in like all sorts of different areas of statistical analysis, whether it's like looking at minimum wage loss statistics, if it's looking at you know, the statistics associated with like fucking gun crime in foreign places, or gun laws as they are associated with gun crime. You see them make the same mistake with taxes and taxes association with things like GDP. They don't know how to properly analyze these things because they're so focused on making it fit whatever narrative they want that they just jump on whatever numbers they think sound good without actually considering if it supports the position they've been that they support.
Right.
And then so on the other end we also have Denmark being one of the first countries to halt its COVID vaccination program completely. And so they're doing it because they say that over there in Denmark the virus is pretty much brought under control. Vaccine coverage in the dating population high, and the epidemic is reversed. And so apparently it's just sort of a temporary halt or like a suspension, that they're not scrapping the vaccination program altogether, because the Danish Health and Medicines Authority said it will probably there will probably be a need to vaccinate against COVID-19 again in the fall. And so, yeah, I mean, this is at least a somewhat like positive news in that, like, finally it's being recognized that this sort of thing really isn't that big of an issue anymore, if it ever was, because there's a lot of it's still up in the air. The COVID numbers themselves that were appearing in the first year and a half, how accurate they were, compared to the magic drop in fucking flu cases. And
yeah. Yeah.
And so, but at least now things are being sort of more acknowledged. We even saw that one lady who goes on like CNN or MSNBC, and who was like telling us that months ago or like half a year ago that vaccination needed to be used as a carrot, or no, the rewards of freedom in society need to be used as a carrot in order to goad us into taking the vaccine. Even she, like over the past 2 weeks or so, was now saying, oh, well, now our freedoms, like the risks need to be kind of weighed with the price of restricting our daily lives. And now our daily freedoms are a little bit more important, and maybe we should consider that before restricting access to stuff. And okay, well, thanks for saying the stuff that we've been saying the whole fucking time.
Yeah, what an incredibly novel idea.
And and so you have here daily new COVID cases per million in Denmark, and it's gone down. It's their major spike seemed to have come and gone, and it came. This was the Omicron times, where it's a good thing for it to come because Omicron wasn't as bad. And
Omicron wasn't really as bad.
Well, yeah, they say vaccinations are likely to return or resume. I hope they fucking don't, because again, the results of them don't seem to have done a whole lot.
Yeah, they produced very little, especially with how rabid a lot of people were in supporting them.
Oh yeah, calling us plague rats and shit.
Yeah, that was my favorite. You got fucking people like Key Hollow famously calling people plague rats constantly, and then getting all sour grapes when a lot of people kind of called her out on that. They're like, well, listen, man, like maybe that's a little bit much. Maybe you need to tone it down a little bit. And she actually lost a lot of support over that, surprisingly.
Yeah, well, I would have thought her follower base would have shifted over to people that would more have approved of that. I don't know, whatever. She's just been pretty funny, pretty entertaining overall, but I try to ignore what's going on there. But yeah, this is a thing that's not even popped up with her, but just in general, like this sort of attitude of othering and of shaming people who make the decision not to get vaccinated, which is also funny when you point out to them, it's like, the populations of people who aren't getting vaccinated, it's not, white conservatives are in there, sure. And that's generally that is definitely a subsection of people that are not getting vaccinated, but another subsection of people is blacks and Latinos.
Yeah,
And
quite a lot of them.
and if you're so concerned about whenever somebody criticizes something that could disproportionately be applied to blacks and Latinos in general, and I think Native Americans too, if I remember correctly, are also there's a considerable subsection of Native Americans that are also unvaccinated for very obvious fucking reasons, I would think.
That would make a ton of sense.
And yeah, but they don't consider it as like, okay, well, when you say plague rats, you mean like, the fucking good section of black people and Latinos who haven't been vaccinated, or you just thinking about white people. Like, this is the crazy part for me, is that like anytime something that I agree with is criticized, it's usually criticized for being like a white thing. Like libertarianism and right-wing anarchism or free market anarchism is considered to be kind of like this white thing. And so it's just super bizarre to me, as being like, look, jumping out being like, but I got brown skin, motherfucker. Like, come on, just talk to me about the issue. Stop bringing up white supremacy and white nationalism, bringing up race, because it don't apply to me. It has nothing to do with me. How about you actually address the arguments, the issues? It should be easy, right? Because it's some racist shit, apparently. Like, oh yeah, I forgot. We got put on a misinformation list. That's right. It's in Tumblr, we got put on the fucking the Russian disinformation, public service announcement to Tumblr. Like,
oh yeah.
This fucking
They
guy.
never showed up either. It's weird. They never messaged me back or showed up or said they'd show up on the show or anything. It's
Yeah, I mean, sure, you can. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they're like these two fucking random motherfuckers on Tumblr who are telling me to go on a podcast. I don't want to go on no stupid podcast with like 2 fucking viewers. Okay, that's fair. You don't want to, but at least you want to at least prove this shit. And that's what the thing is, that they feel like this. Once you label something misinformation, once you label it disinformation or Russian propaganda or whatever, then it's like there's no, like, that's the rebuttal. Like, then you've disproved. It's like, okay, well, no. If it's misinformation, if it's disinformation, then you just got to point out what's wrong with it. Like, then you just use information. Give me the information. So if it's disinformation, then you have the information. So
right.
So hand it over.
I didn't really see them actually doing much of that either. I was curious, so I looked, and like, yeah, it wasn't anything. It was literally just anybody who disagreed with them went on the list. I was more hurt that they spelled my fucking name wrong, but whatever.
Yeah. And I think one of the things was brought up was the Buka attack, and I think Maripol was also in there as well. And it's like, bro, what misinformation were we spreading about Buka and Maripol? We were broadcasting videos of people from the towns getting interviewed about what happened to them. And they're like, yeah, the fucking, Azov came in and was fucking, pulling some bullshit. And I didn't really see a lot of Russians. And also I didn't hear bombs going off. And, it's like, hello, like, this is where are the Russians? We're talking to the people who live there, or at least we're showcasing videos, of people who live there talking about what happened to them. And yeah, they can't actually address the data, the interviews, reports. And like you've obviously been here every time that we've discussed these issues, and it's not like we praise Putin, praise Russia, anything of that sort. And I always try to bring up what the left wing like narrative is or argument is, and try to address it directly on its face. Like when the Eastern Donbass, when we talked about the Eastern Donbass being populated by mostly Russian population, I also talked about how the fact that a lot of leftists will bring up the Holodomor and the Soviet ruling over the area as or the genocide of the area is the reason why it's now largely Russian populated. Is that it used to be Ukrainian populated, but the Soviets helped kill a bunch of people in the area, so the Russians kind of took over of that area. We've discussed that. It's not like we're hiding these sorts of things. The left-wing argument or the pro-Ukraine argument side of this. We're taking these issues head on. And yeah, man, like I've seen your posts about to different people on the subject, and it's like, listen, we fucking spank home exactly what's important. We're not fucking apologizing for Russia. We think that they're shitbags for going in and doing what they did. We feel for the people of Ukraine, but the thing is, the causes of all these issues, the interests in the area, they don't just fall from the sky. They don't just appear out of nowhere. This isn't happening for no fucking reason.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I mean, yeah, it's like the most recent one. Probably a couple days ago now. I don't know. I have a hard time keeping up with all this shit. Um, yeah, you point out this stuff, and instead of addressing it, you just kind of get the same response over and over again. It's fucking frustrating.
Oh yeah, and we saw that come out in full force when we covered the New York protests and you know, the chance of Azov in there. And when you point out the Nazi infiltration or the Nazi kind of base within Azov, it's waved away as Russian propaganda, Russian misinformation. And then we look at the fucking, you know, the Azov members talking about their influence. Look at the fucking tattoos. Look at the fucking patches. We're not, like, you can't lie to us about this. You can't tell us that we're making this up or that Russia is making it up, because we see it on fucking USA Today.
They're proud of it. Like, they're not hiding it. I don't get why. I mean, you know, it's literally these fucking dudes in Ukraine, and they're Nazis. There's a bunch of Eastern Europeans. Why the fuck do Western liberals feel like they have to make excuses for these people? I don't fucking understand. It's like it costs them absolutely nothing to say that's a bad guy.
Yeah, and of course they're sticking with the idea that the 2014 coup was not a, you know, U.S. backed or puppet coup or anything like that. And despite, it's like, dude, we have pictures of John McCain there in the crowds helping encourage the fucking Azov, like the right-wing nationalist factions to, no, who was the other guys? God dang it. It wasn't Azov. It was, dang, I got to look them up again. But there was another right-wing nationalist party that was also being egged on by John McCain and by another fucking war hawk that went there to visit. It's
John
like,
McCain doing what he does best.
It's like, oh, fuck, bro. What else do you need besides John Bomb Iran McCain there on the ground taking pictures with the motherfuckers to go, maybe the U.S. had something to fucking do with this?
Just a little bit. A smidgen.
And yeah, we got the, you know, disinformation board coming about. Glenn Greenwald, of course, making an article about this and pointing out how it's even more pernicious than it seems. And
oh yeah, that woman's a fucking psychopath. Jesus Christ. The more I find out about her, like, the angrier I get.
Yeah, it's to be expected. One, I mean, she's a theater kid, and I think most of them deserve to be bullied off the face of the planet to begin with.
Oof, yeah, that's already a, yeah.
My experience with theater kids has not been good, I tell you what.
I don't let them on my property.
For good reason, yeah.
Absolutely.
I did like The Lion King. That was a great play. That's a good one. It's a great experience, you know. It's fantastic. The songs are great. Which makes you even more angry that the Lion King remake, let's go on a tangent, the Lion King remake was fucking horrible. And singing sucked, and the songs were horribly done. And they had a whole play with excellent, like, original stuff that could be used, and they didn't use the play's stuff at all. Anyway, sorry, that was point is theater kids, fuck them. And fuck this lady who used to be a theater kid and her stupid songs. But what was the oh yeah, she also, of course, was one of the people that were you know, talking about how there were the intelligence agencies and intelligence officials who disproved the truth of the Hunter Biden emails. and about, you know, Joe Biden's connections to China and Ukraine. And those were all Russian disinformation, provably so, except that they fucking weren't. And now the lady who pushed that narrative gets to decide what's disinformation and what is not.
With Department of Homeland Security enforcing this shit, because I mean, there will absolutely be an enforcement element. Anybody who thinks there won't be is a fucking idiot. There's no reason to hand this to the Department of Homeland Security unless they are going to start fucking enforcing this shit.
I mean, people are still taking off their shoes at fucking airports, despite the fact that we clearly don't goddamn need to.
The fucking TSA has never caught anybody, like, as far as I know.
This is fucking fucked. And so yeah, we have an example of how this will clearly be used in a double standard sort of method, which we got CNN.
So, Director, a bunch of questions from this. Let me just start with this. How much does the source matter, right? So you hear the story of this laptop. We don't know a lot. We do know that the way that this information is getting out is through Steve Bannon and Rudy Giuliani. How much does the source matter here?
Well, source matters a lot, and the timing matters a lot, I think. And to me, this is just classic.
Oh, I love that. The timing matters a lot. If the timing of the Steele dossier fucking didn't matter at all, but the timing of this fucking thing, we really gotta analyze that shit.
Dude looks like an actual goblin.
Yes.
Soviet Russian tradecraft at work. The Russians have analyzed the target. They understand that the president and his enablers crave dirt on Vice President Biden, whether it's real or contrived, it doesn't matter to them. And so all of a sudden, two and a half weeks before the election,
whether it's real or contrived doesn't even seem to matter to these motherfuckers.
This laptop appears somehow without, and emails on it without any metadata. It's all very curious. But so here you have a willing target, and the Russians, who are very sophisticated about how to exploit a willing target. And to me, that's what's at work here.
And so, you know, when you try to figure out the specifics of, you know, whether that meeting email, for example, is real in the midst of this, do you think stuff like that could just have been planted in there and be completely fake?
I do. I think the emails could be contrived, particularly since, as I understand it from what I've read, they appear without any metadata. That is, you know, from, to, and any technical data, at least immediately evident. Now, if this
and Hunter Biden wouldn't have any reason to want to, you know, clear any metadata from those sources. That's not something that he'd want to do for any reason. And
of course not.
And what about the photos of Hunter Biden? Like, were those fucking fake, bro? Like, did you know, we can do analysis of photos to figure out whether they've been photoshopped or not. Like, this is the thing, we can look at the pixels and we can figure out whether they were, you know, originally part of an image taken as one, or if there was manipulation after the fact. These are things we could do, brother. And you know, we got Hunter Biden and is all his whitey-tighty glory.
Computer is in the hands of the FBI. They have obviously excellent, sophisticated technical and forensic analytic capabilities, and I think they'll be able to sort it out, whether this is genuine or not. But, you know, it's all pretty curious, given, again, 2.5 weeks out from the election.
Yeah, so that's the expert analysis that was done at the time that would have helped, you know, label any you know, news of the laptop as Russian disinformation, and you know, this was just the pervasive narrative at the time, and just the type of thing that this office would, you know, label as disinformation, despite that it was completely fucking true. And so of course, you know, we're gonna see this happen with all sorts of shit, because I mean, as you know, I are both intimately aware, any like spreading of truth or any questioning of main narratives, all that stuff is labeled disinformation and immediately swept under the table, swept under the rug, whatever the phrase is. and it's just not addressed on its own merits, on its own grounds. And is that so much to ask? Is it so much to ask that if people are going to claim that something is discredited, that they just fucking prove it without like relying on these like flimsy you know, quote unquote authority figures and fact checkers and shit? It's just like, just reason this shit through. How difficult is that?
Well, it's not that it's difficult. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I mean, yeah, it's not that it's difficult. It's that they don't want to. I mean, they totally could. They do it with all kinds of shit if it serves their political narrative.
Oh god, this song is on here too. I'm not gonna play it.
Fuck me.
we don't need to do this to ourselves. But yeah,
No.
her little disinformation song is on there. Yeah, there's partisan decisions. Let's see the polls. They say government should take steps to restrict false information online. Boom, up to 65% in U.S. adults on the Democratic leaning Democratic side.
I'm shocked.
And yeah, even the tech companies should take steps to restrict false info, because of course the First Amendment does not apply to tech companies. And the First Amendment is not like the freedom of speech is not like a principle in and of itself. It's just something that restricts government, and we should only keep it restricting government, and everybody else should restrict speech as much as possible, because words are dangerous.
Private platform, they can restrict whatever they want, you know, unless it's, you know, Elon Musk buying Twitter, and then suddenly they're not so jazzed about a private platform doing whatever it wants anymore.
And I think there should be pushback on this idea that corporations are private platforms.
Oh yeah, there's no fucking way. Like the idea that a corporation like Facebook or fucking Google, who, I mean, it's fucking stupid anyway. Like, I mean, immediately, Facebook and Google take millions of dollars from the government to allow them to access to their websites, and to be able to sift through their data and their information, to influence, you know, their decisions and shit like that. So immediately, it doesn't make any sense. Tech platforms are just another arm of the government now.
Yeah, no, that's most definitely true. But it's just their structure of ownership itself is not that of a private. So when you the word private, right, means like individual. Like an individual is a private person.
Yeah, these are publicly traded companies.
Yeah, it's a publicly traded company, and people, like even people claiming to be libertarians or pro free market, will say, well, you know, the corporation owns, it's private property of the corporation, but you can't collectively own something privately. That doesn't make any fucking sense. And the only reason why the corporation can own something is because it created the articles of incorporation and filed it with the government. Because again, the government grants these. What you do when you collectivize under the legal person that is your corporation, you are mitigating liability to all of the actual private individuals that make up the board of directors or the shareholders or what have you. Is that those private individuals now are not individually responsible for their actions. The public corporation is. So this is, you know, the idea that this is somehow private ownership, even though we want to say, oh, you know, this is not publicly, like this factory is not owned by all of the public, but it is owned by the public of the corporation. And that's the thing, is that public ownership can take on forms besides government ownership. Collectivization can take place outside of just the state. And, you know, so when we merge in decisions and liability into a legal entity that doesn't actually exist within real life, and then we don't expect this to have any like effect on how the people within it are going to conduct themselves and how they're going to take upon, like, make decisions that would maybe be way more risky than if they were personally, individually held responsible for what goes on there. Like, let's say like the oil spills, you know, by like oil companies, right? they have a contract with the government that limits their liability for the environmental damage. That if they cause, X number of $1 billion of damage, well, they only have to pay back a smaller percentage of that because of their limited liability for accidents. And this is part of their contracts with drilling in public lands and, in the oceans. It's part of just their conditions of incorporation. And so then to turn around to pretend that all of these protections and all of these benefits and all of the exploitation of these advantages is somehow the responsibility or the fault of the free market is just insane.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And on the topic of misinformation and on the trust for the government itself, we have the Ron Paul Institute. Great articles happening all the time. That dude is doing the Lord's work, I think. I mean, he was one of the first people to back in 2008 when he was running for president, when he was running for president back then, he was one of the first voices that I heard talking about markets and about freedom in a way that actually made sense to me and allowed me to use his kind of speeches and ideas as a springboard to investigate more about free markets and libertarianism, anarchism, that sort of stuff. Mises Institute, all that stuff kind of spawned out. First, it was being introduced to Thomas Sowell and just generally market ideas and criticism of collectivization and collectivism, but then pretty soon after Thomas Sowell was Ron Paul, and that was one of the first earliest instances of me being called a white supremacist on Tumblr was because I was talking about, it was I think after the election, but I was talking about how I had supported Ron Paul, or Ron Paul came up in some way that exposed me as being favorable to him, and some fucking Tumblr commie called me a white supremacist because the thing is, I had a black and white photo of myself on my blog at the time, and I guess from how it was lightened, or because how it was the shading happened, he thought I was white. And so he was like, yeah, you're just a white supremacist. And I'm like, well, no, man, I'm a Latino man. I'm a brown guy. He's like, well, your photo, you kind of look white passing. And this is a white guy, by the way. This is a white guy talking to me about this. And he's like, you're white passing, so therefore, you can support white supremacists and still feel comfortable and gain from that situation. And I posted a color photo. I'm like, I'm as brown, I'm very clearly I'm not white. It might be one of those Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson situations where you're like, is he Polynesian? Is he Iranian? Is he Latino? I don't know. But it was a generically brown man, definitely not a white man. And yeah, he backtracked pretty fucking quickly after that. But
of course.
But yeah, my point is that my support for Ron Paul was one of the first things to ever get me called a white supremacist. And
makes you kind of proud, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a little warm place in my heart where I'm like, oh man, Ron Paul, I love you. You got me called a white supremacist. We're doing the Lord's work here together, you and I, Mr. Dr. Paul. That's how I know that we were on the right track. But yeah, so he talks about an extraordinary article that appeared in, of all places, NBC News, reporting that the U.S. intelligence community is knowingly feeding information it does not believe accurate to the U.S. mainstream media for the American audience to consume. In other words, the article reports that the U.S. quote-unquote deep state admits to being actively engaged in lying to the American people in hopes that it can manipulate public opinion. According to the NBC News article, quote, multiple U.S. officials acknowledged that the U.S. has used information as a weapon, even when confidence in the accuracy of the information wasn't high. Sometimes it has used low confidence intelligence for deterrent effect. I love the way that's phrased.
So disinformation? Is that disinformation? Would that count as disinformation? Isn't that weird?
Or at least misinformation. I love how these two are being parsed as different things right now. This was not like a thing that was even like on the radar 8 months ago or so. But now we have disinformation and misinformation, because like dis is like purposefully misleading, right? And mis is just like stuff that's like not totally accurate, that like they just kind of report. And it's like, I don't give a fuck about about that shit. It's wrong, and y'all are doing it. It's not like something that you can point to just one side or anything. It's just but this is even when confidence in the accuracy of the information wasn't high, they still put it out. Like, if you're questioning us, then you're dabbling in Russian propaganda.
Ridiculous. It's kind of shit that pisses me off because, you know, I mean, it's
Well, it's the stuff that's been used to label Russia as this unique evil that needs to be opposed, you know, by all means. It's the type of stuff where you tell people, listen, man, there's nuance here. There's bad guys on both sides. You know, there's Nazis on one side, and so we need to consider the context of how we got to this situation in order to fully appreciate how we can halt the tensions that are going on, because we can't just throw money and weapons at the situation to make sure that it goes away, or that's not going to make it go away. We have to acknowledge the source of the conflict and why it's happening. And instead they say, well, no, you're just buying into Putin's plot to denazify Ukraine, which is total bullshit and is not real. And there's no sense of nuance or sense of accurately assessing what came to be. And one thing that actually he discusses is the actual false information that was spread by the CIA, which is, you know, should be important to know, because I feel like a lot of people don't even know that it happened. And he goes on to say, readers will recall the shocking headlines that Russia was prepared to use chemical weapons in Ukraine, that China would be providing military equipment to Russia, that Russian President Vladimir Putin was being fed misinformation by his advisors, and more. All of these were churned out by the CIA to be repeated in the American media, even though they were known to be false. It was all about, as one intelligence officer said in the article, trying to get inside Putin's head. That may have been the goal, but what the CIA actually did was get inside America's head with false information meant to shape the public perception of the conflict. They lied to propagandize us in favor of the Biden administration's narrative, which is absolutely true.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And this,
like,
no, go ahead.
Oh no, you're fine. Go ahead. What you got?
Well, no, and this is the alarming bit, is that those of us who want a bit of nuance and want, like, recognize the red flags of when you have this article or news come out that just seems to be cartoonishly biased, or cartoonishly framing the situation as Putin the unique evil and Ukraine the valiant defenders. Whenever you take a step back and go, is this really all there is to the fucking story? You know, suddenly you're just, you know, you're in favor of Putin. You don't care about the Ukrainian people. There's so much stuff that's thrown at you. If you just want a bit of measured response, a little bit of nuance in examining what's going on, it's immediately to, you're a fucking Russian dupe. And then after the fact, it turns out that we were right the whole GD time.
Yeah. And I mean, it's fucking frustrating, because this is like, you put in all this fucking time and like effort. I mean, just even learning about this stuff or reading about it, and then you can't get past this fucking wall of some dipshit just, that's rough. It's Russian misinformation. You're like, yeah, but it's here. Like, we have the information. Like, look at it. You can see it. You can see this happening. They're talking about it. Here's the videos. Here's the information. No, it's just Russian information. It's Russian disinformation, and they can't even tell you They can't show you the chain of custody where this is coming from in terms of, well, it's Russian disinformation. You're like, okay, cool. So where's it coming from? Who? How do you know that? Who is feeding this information to who? Like, where is it coming from? Well, it just is because it,
yeah, there's
says Ukraine
no
is the bad guy.
there's no reasonable place that this would be coming from, in U.S. sources. Like, there's no.
Well, no, it's like Scott Horton said. Like a guy in fucking Texas has absolutely no love for Russia. Why the fuck would he be then, propagating Russian misinformation? Like we don't owe anything to Russia. I don't owe anything to Russia. I don't give a shit.
Nobody here cares about Russia other than fucking tankies. And tankies are not a like big political faction that actually has a lot of influence in like mainstream politics at all.
Fuck
And
no.
definitely not in right-wing circles.
Yeah, that's no, absolutely not.
If you think that right wingers are going to tanky sources and going, yeah, these fucking commies have a point, I better push that narrative as the truth without question. Do you think that's I don't know that that's happening.
I'm fairly certain that I can say with confidence that it's not. I feel safe making that assertion.
Yeah, and based Ron Paul, of course, goes on to cite other historical instances of CIA committing disinformation campaigns. Obviously, there's Russiagate, Bay of Pigs was something that Kennedy tried to address, and famously saying to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scattered into the winds. Before his head just did that.
Yeah, his head was split into 1,000 pieces and scattered to the wind. Yep.
But it just did that on its own. It was like a sneeze, very, very violent sneeze that sort of just fucking blew out the back of his head.
Just kind of did that, yeah.
On its own, yeah. And there's stuff like the crack epidemic in the 90s. Like, we know the CIA funneled crack into inner cities. We know the name of the fucking drug dealer that they used to funnel drugs into LA. That would be Rick Ross, right? Not the Rick Ross from hip hop, but the drug dealer Rick Ross.
Rick Ross, no.
But these are things these are knowns as the fucking who the fuck was that? Who said that? It was Dick Cheney or somebody in it was one of the right wing war hawks during the Bush years, where they're like, there's the known knowns, there's the known unknowns, and we got the unknown unknowns, the things that we don't know. And the stuff about the weapons, well, that's kind of in the known knowns, maybe, sort of, but it wasn't true. Anyways, then we know about the CIA funneling crack into LA using Rick Ross and to pay for the fucking what was it? The Argentine Contra fighters.
Yeah, Ron Contra, yeah.
And so yeah, the CIA is up to some shit, and it always has been for fucking decades. And so
MK Ultra. MK Ultra.
Yeah, I mean, what? It's like, it makes you seem wild to just recount, or it makes you seem like a fucking crazy person to recount the actual things that the CIA. Yeah, so they were trying to experiment with brainwashing using mind-altering drugs like acid. They funneled crack into inner cities, fucking assassinated people, 70 or 80 regime changes in the course of a couple decades. Like, this is just fucking par for the course for the CIA. And if you drop this into casual conversation with some normies, they're just like, what the fuck kind of videos are you watching on them YouTubes, motherfucker? And you're like, nah, this is real. This is stuff we know it to be true.
They admitted they did it.
Yeah. And
they fully admitted that they did it.
And in other completely sane and hinged, not unhinged. Is not unhinged mean hinged? I don't. Anyways,
I like hinged.
Some hinged and grounded, sensible opinions coming from the Wall Street Journal. The U.S. should show it can win a nuclear war.
It's a great idea. Remember when Trump was the worst thing to happen because he was going to start a nuclear war with Putin?
We can't have this wild man with his finger on the button. Cut to 4 years later. Maybe we should press that button. Yeah, let's go ahead and press the fucking button. This is not crazy. It can possibly end the world.
We can't have Trump with his finger on the button, but we can absolutely have Joe Biden who can't finish a fucking sentence, and might just forget what it does. He should have the button. Sure.
And I'm not signing up for the Wall Street Journal to read the rest of this shit. I really don't care, but it's just a wild headline. Of course, that they are they're going to use the Russian threat of nuclear attack as a justification for doing some preemptive preparation of their own. But again,
our nuclear arsenal.
But this again kind of glosses over all the reasons why we're in this fucking situation to begin with. It's like we're provoking hostility. This is stuff that, like, we're doing this on Russia's doorstep and expecting them to just have no reaction whatsoever, as if like we would have the same sort of stoicism if this sort of stuff was happening like in Mexico or some shit. And it's just I don't know, it's completely hypocritical, and it's completely just laughable that they think that Russia should just sit back and allow themselves to be aggressed upon in this kind of way. And it is aggression. That's like, people don't want to, they don't want to call it that. They want to be like, well, just the Russians doing all this stuff, so defending NATO is just it's just defense. It's like, well, you have to, if you're going to analyze how Russia is going to respond, you have to analyze how the Russian point of view, or how they would view these actions, how they would interpret these sorts of things. It's not nothing. It's not insignificant. It's not irrelevant. It is very relevant. It's very important to understand. I'm just beating a dead horse over here because it's just stupid. Like, of course we need to understand what Russia would think about all this stuff, because if we expect to deal with them on the world stage, we can't just do whatever the fuck we want and expect them not to have any sort of reaction, any sort of response.
Yeah, like, you have to understand how they're gonna react, as not as some kind of fucking cartoon villain. Like, they're real people. They have real reactions. Like, you can't fucking do this thing where well, they're evil, so they're not gonna react like a normal fucking human being, or they're not going to do anything when we do XYZ. We're just going to enact our plan and everything will work out.
Yeah, and this was tried already in the Middle East, with the war on terror, that they said, okay, well, they hate America, they hate our values, and they're here to kill us all, and they don't care, they hate us for our freedoms, and when in actuality they cared about their homeland. So a lot of them use radical Islam to whip people up into a fervor. But the reason why people were able to be unified under the banner of Islam was because they were all getting bombed together, right? They were losing their uncles and their nephews and their fucking daughters, and just fucking neighbors, anybody. Like, people were getting bombed for no reason. Kids were growing up in fear of clear skies because they didn't know if a drone was up there ready to fucking bomb the barbecue down the street. And this stuff has an effect on how people are going to view the United States and what they were willing to do to punish the country that they perceive as causing their problems. And this is why we had attackers who were educated and who were even part of like European society, part of you living in the United States, that they had ties to Pakistan, to places in the Middle East, and they saw what was going on there with the bombings and with their people being displaced, and they said, this is wrong and we need to address this and bring attention to this and do something about it. And instead, of course, their motivations were just written off as like, well, they're just Islamic terrorists who, they'll throw a gay person off the building, so of course they're going to bomb, a U.S. city. And even the right wingers at the time were guilty of this sort of this demonization of Islam as like being the primary reason why the West and the Middle East could not get along, or why multiculturalism was bad, or what the fuck they wanted to make the case for. And when it really didn't have anything to do with any of that shit. It's like, okay, yes, the forced integration or forced multiculturalism seems to not be the best strategy for organizing a society, but the freedom to associate kind of will take care of that in ways that's like, okay, we'll have people naturally get together that have ideals that are compatible. Right, people aren't going to like maintain societies and communities with people that they're going to have constant conflicts with, and so freedom can handle that bit, and it can allow people of Islamic faiths. Many of there's billions of them, and many of them are decent fucking people, and many Christians are decent people. I'm an atheist guy; I don't believe in God at all, but a lot of the people that I hang out with online or that I interact with, in general, are Christian people who see me as an ally in terms of like our causes, and we get along great. I like Christians for the most part. There's definitely some wild ones out there, but and I've gotten along with Muslim people and Jews and all that kind of shit, and all it takes is for you to fucking be kind of sensible, not be an ideologue, not have this whole like chip on your shoulder about identity and about wielding power over those who disagree with you. It doesn't take a lot.
It really doesn't. Yeah. I mean, it takes so little.
And I know, you're kind of in the same boat where it's like, you don't really consider yourself, much of a religious person, but like like I said, our circles and sort of our online circles are like, very Christian. I was like surprised to kind of find out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was brought up in a religiously fundamental, and when I say, I mean fundamental, not like I don't know, right on the border, honestly, when it comes to the extremism. I was brought up in a religiously fundamental family, so like I mean that was like my whole life as a teenager, until I was 16, 17 years old, is when I was finally I was kicked out of the house. Honestly, though, it worked out really well for me. But yeah, when I was like 16, 17 years old, I was kicked out of the house. That was it. But I mean, up until then, like, I mean, so I mean, I've been around people like that my whole life. Now, not to the extreme degree that my family was. I mean, there's certainly like a whole spectrum in there of people that have all kinds of different views and stuff. I'm not absolutely not trying to paint all people of like just like religious persuasion with a broad brush here. I don't think that they're all extremists or anything like that. That was an extremely good example of an extremely bad type of religious people. But yeah, I mean, like the groups that we tend to kind of brush up against are, I mean, they're kind of all over the place, but when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially like you're seeing a lot more Christian anarchists, even.
Yeah.
Which first seems kind of counter. I mean, if you don't know anything about anarchy and you think that all it means is chaos and everybody does whatever the fuck they want, then I can understand why you'd be confused. But like when you really start looking into the anarchist ideology and stuff, it makes a ton of sense. Like, no man is fit to rule me because every man is imperfect. That totally fits right in with the Christian perspective. Absolutely.
Yeah, and wanting to center, your community or your place of upbringing and like your kids and all that stuff, centering it around the values that you want to have, for your community, rather than whatever fucking state enforced values happen to be around at the time.
Yeah, whatever it's been democratically decided that your children are going to learn now. Yeah, I mean it makes total sense.
Yeah, and I came up sort of simply. I wouldn't say fundamentalist, but yeah, very devoutly Christian. My mom was a Baptist at the time. We went to Baptist churches at the time. I even played guitar in the church band as a teenager. My dad was Catholic. I think he's still Catholic, and my mom grew up Catholic in Colombia, right? You know, so it's like she grew up a Colombian Catholic. This is very fucking Catholic. She went to school at church, like in a Catholic school, and for a good portion of her like early adulthood, wanted to be a nun. And then you had to move to the U.S. in her 30s, and I don't know at what point she went from being Catholic to being Baptist. But yeah, when I was growing up, we were going to Baptist churches, and yeah, I grew up in Christian culture, and again, I wouldn't say fundamentalist, but very devoutly so, considered the Word of God and Bible with every kind of decision that they would go about. And yeah, they're decent people. Sure, there's people that are hypocrites and they're flawed and they're fucking humans. And I don't think any Christians are going to claim that that Christians are like a paragon of morality and that sort of sort of sense. People can adopt the Christian label and still be horrible fucking people. And that's something I think every Christian will admit. But this sort of like this like pushback, like this cultural pushback against what seem to be Judeo-Christian values that kind of are centered around a bit of social conservatism, like in terms of like favoring, maybe not like wanting your cities and the places that you're, bringing up your children to be like crime ridden, right? And like full of like, I don't know, like strippers and shit. And like, it's just like this stuff, seems like it's like, oh, these Christians are just fucking oppressing us, but also like a lot of this seems just to be sensible family values.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly.
And I mean, you may have a kind of more invested interest in this sort of stuff, having a kid and understanding is like you're raising a kid and what kind of society, what kind of environment do you want that sort of child to be brought up in. And it's like, yeah, sometimes maybe, a bit of conservatism, a bit of restraint in terms of some of these issues should be exercised for the kids.
I mean, especially the mentality that, and I'm kind of on a limbo here because in some ways it's like you can make the argument that it's self-inflicted. You can also make the argument that a lot of people don't have any choice but to put their children in public schools because we have created this necessity for both parents in a household to work in order to sustain a household. I mean, that's a whole other thing, but like the fact of the matter is that we have I mean, that's the norm. Sending your kid to public school, that's the norm. They go to school, you go to work. That's the normal thing. So, in a lot of ways, you can kind of argue that, like, culturally, we've brought it on ourselves. We've allowed the state to do more and more for us, whereas we used to be much more involved in our children's education, and now we're not. And yeah, it makes me sound like a fucking trad, but it's true. It's completely true. And I'll say it to anybody who fucking asks me. Like, they're absolutely right about that. We have moved very far away from taking a lot of personal responsibility for stuff like that, and we've placed it on the state. And let's be honest, the teachers, we don't know everything about them. They are still kind of strangers. And then then you run into this issue with, well, now they're teaching them stuff that you don't approve of, and oftentimes they don't even know. They don't know what the curriculum is. They don't have access to look at it themselves. You aren't actively involved in your child's education. Then you don't know what they're being taught, and they can teach them anything that they want. And then before you know it, they've been indoctrinated, which is also true, I think.
Oh yeah, I know firsthand about how many just openly leftist high school teachers I had here in Southern California, where I remember one of them, he was the teacher who was also in charge of the after school film club that showed like indie films and stuff like that, and a lot of I saw some pretty cool films that like opened my eyes up to just the art of film and stuff. Memento I saw back then, which is a great movie. But also one of the things that he showed us was Fahrenheit, what was it 9/11? Yeah, Fahrenheit 9/11, the Roger Moore documentary. Is it Roger? No, not Roger. Roger was it? No, not Roger Moore. Not Roger Moore. What was it? Michael Moore. Sorry, Roger Moore was.
Michael Moore. Yeah,
Roger Moore was
Michael Moore.
fucking 007. But yeah.
Goddamn Jabba the Hutt.
But yeah, Michael Moore. And so I mean, to be fair to this teacher too, he did say, like, when he was introducing the movie, he's like, listen, this is a liberally biased, left-wing biased movie done by a guy who identifies as like a left-winger, or liberal, or whatever you want to call it. So it's not like he tried to hide that it was actually like a biased thing, but he also didn't really fully explain like how these biases led to misleading scenes in the movie. And one that I can remember explicitly clear that I know was a very misleading one was where he like went to the bank and like got a gun for opening up a checking account or opening up a savings account. I forget which one it was. Yeah. But basically, yeah, so he had gone to the fucking place, signed up for the savings account, and then he walked out with a rifle and he was holding it above his head like, look, I got a rifle that they gave me for opening up the savings account. And then it turned out as like he had like gone to the place, and they're like, no, see, the thing is like you sign up for it, and then like there's this waiting period, and then like you get it when you go to the gun store to collect it after certain paperwork has gone through. And then he had like arranged with the bank in order to have the gun provided to him on the spot in person, that he had specially tried to arrange for all this to happen. And so the only reason why he was able to even film the scene was because he had finagled it that way to happen on purpose. And then like the people, the poor fucking workers of the bank, like they saw him filming the bit outside in their parking lot where he's like raising the gun above his head going like, I got it, sort of thing. And they're like, this motherfucker, I cannot fucking believe the fucking balls in this asshole to act like this is something that like, oh, this is just the normal thing. They gave you the gun. Look at what they gave me.
We're just arming them out. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, that was one of the fucking crazy things. Anyway, my point is, this liberal professor, also his girlfriend, who then became his wife, who was another teacher there, who was also the other teacher who was like the teacher overseer of the film club. I remember I had talked to them once in my junior year about how I was like, yeah, I don't think I'll be going to college. I don't really see that there's a lot that I want to study there, and I know I can't afford it. I know that I do not have money to pay for college, even community college. I really just don't have it. My mom's a single mom. I'm not gonna ask her for money to do this. I'm gonna find another way to make my way in the world. I'm gonna either teach myself some skills. I'm gonna go to the work, to the actual job market and see if I can make my way through a job that I enjoy and raise there. And they're like, no, you got to take out loans, man. You got to use government grants. You got to take advantage of money. You got to go into debt and go to college, because that's the only way that you're going to have anything fucking happen in your life. And you need to go to college. You need to fucking do it. You need to go to college. You better go to college. Dude.
I mean, that's exactly how I got roped into it. So, I mean, I'm not, yeah, I mean, that's literally it. Like, that was the exact same experience I had. Everybody said, listen, if you don't go to college, you're gonna be a failure forever. You're not gonna be able to get a job anywhere. And that's it. Like, you gotta go.
Yeah, so I did, not immediately after high school, but I did check out a community college for a bit, and then I checked out one of those private art colleges for a bit, and just it wasn't for me. I didn't like the environment, or at least I just wasn't into it at the fucking time. So I just ended up with a couple $1,000s in debt, for the short short amount of time that I did go to college. I just racked up like fucking, I don't know, $6 or $7 grand in debt there that's still like, I have to pay back to this day. Cause I mean, I'm not paying that shit for now, at least. But yeah, so that's all that it gave me. I could have easily avoided that kind of shit by just going out into the job market and pursuing, now the position that I have now, I mean, I'm earning a living for myself. I'm a cook. It's not like the best living in the world. I'm still straddling the poverty line, but it's what I like to do. I like working in food. I like working in kitchens, and I've used I started fucking working in fast casual places like fucking Panera Bread and shit like that. and made my way to, you know, full service restaurants, and then made my way to a full service vegan restaurant that I really like. And then, you know, started off as just doing the line cook stuff. And then I got promoted into a position. I just paid attention to what was going on in the restaurant, right? I said to myself, okay, if I'm going to, if I'm interested in how a restaurant gets run, then I better pay attention to the things that people who run restaurants need to pay attention to. You know, the fucking you know, for example, like if we're having a busy shift, right? There's a lot of tables being sat, and suddenly I find out that the plates that we're using to plate our burgers, I'm running out of them. And I don't have enough of them, and they're ordering more burgers, but I don't have enough plates. And I go to my dishwasher, and he's like, "I don't have any dirty burger plates to give you because nobody, like, they're all being used up at the table." And then I say to myself, well, if he doesn't have any plates to give me, and if I don't have any plates to go out, but we're still getting orders, and we have a bunch of people in the restaurant who are using up the plates, what's the solution to this issue? Now, a lot of people in the line cook position are just like, well, that's not really my problem. I just complain about the fact that I don't have enough plates. But what I did was I just went to the manager and I was like, hey, you go to the store and buy plates, right? So can you do that? Because we need more, because I'm finding out that when we're busy, we're running out. And it's not the dishwasher's fault. It's not the server's fault for not collecting the plates. It's not our fault for not magicking the plates. We just need more plates. So please go and buy us some plates because it will make everybody's life better. And they just go out and buy some plates. And then they go, hey man, that Fonzie guy, he pays attention to the details of like what he needs, instead of just complaining about, you know, oh, you know, the fridge isn't working properly. Is like, hey, I've noticed that the gaskets are kind of cut up on the fridge. Maybe we should replace those because that can cause problems with insulation, which can cause problems with us maintaining the proper temperature within our refrigerators. It also means that we're using more power to power those refrigerators. Like, it's just, I was paying attention to shit. And then they promoted me. They're like, let's give this guy a position of authority in the kitchen because he's already doing that fucking job anyway. And, you know, I chose a small business. Like, I chose a restaurant that was, you know, owned by the people that I've met, you know, that I could talk to directly. And, you know, that's how I made my way in the job market. I was just like, okay, let me choose a place that is a place that I can be proud to work for, that is something that I can take pride in, and that I can, you know, I can bring my concerns and my contributions to the business, and they can acknowledge it, and they can recognize it and reward me for those sorts of things. And yeah, I didn't need to fucking go to college to do that.
Yeah, I mean, no, and the only thing going to college and then doing that would do is, yeah, rack up debt. I mean, I did the exact same thing. I ended up fucking not needing to go to college at all for what I went for, and I still racked up the debt for it. And then I, you know, actually I ended up fucking homeless because I ran out of money and I couldn't go anywhere. So, you know,
Yeah.
there was no reason for me to go. Like I wouldn't say there wasn't any reason, but like there wasn't a whole lot. I did very little in college that contributed to what I do now.
Yeah, like you
'Cause
wouldn't
I
say it
live
was
further.
vital to survival and success in today's,
No,
you know,
I mean, I went to college.
and I would say that, like, the to the degree that college is quote unquote required to be successful is largely due to the artificial expansion of college when it didn't need to be expanded.
Right. Absolutely.
And yeah, so that's what we got for the weekly happenings. I feel like there was one or two other things that happened, but I mean, abortion was kind of the big one, and you know, a bits on like the changes with the disinformation board and all that. But yeah, there was you know, some things here and there, but not like a huge list of things. But we do have, if you want to go through some more enough already chapters, I think we could just do the rest of it today. We have 4 more videos on that if you're down.
Yeah, I'm down, man. I'm off all day tomorrow, so I'm basically just hanging out and busting out this this Warhammer commission I got.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. All right. So yeah, the next one on the list is Syria, and that should be a fun time because that's you know, that's chemical weapons. That's all sorts of fun stuff, misinformation of all kind. And honestly, like how fucking crazy are these videos though?
I mean, they're incredible. I've there's a coworker of mine, which I don't like a lot about where I work right now. I hate working for people, so like that's just the big one, and I'll never get away from that. But um, I do have quite a few of my coworkers that, or I guess my employees, that I enjoy hanging out with, and one of them in particular, I've actually been getting him to watch a lot of these Scott Horton videos, just because we chit chat about stuff every once in a while. And I mean, he watched one of them, and now he's hooked. Like we talk about him all the time. So
Yeah, and it's just fucking wild because it's it's some evil shit. You know, like there's no other way to put it. It's like this is the people behind this kind of shit have to be absolutely fucking evil. They have like they like this this is proof that truly fucking horrifically evil people exist in the world, because we're talking about just thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people's lives that are being millions of people's lives that are being either ended, and then millions more who are being thrust into like eternal turmoil in their fucking living situations, to the point where they're not getting water and sewage and like hospitals and shit. It's like we are creating entire countries of just like destitute, desperate, just downtrodden people. And it's like there's very little that we could do to over exaggerate how horrific the experiences of some of these people are, and how complicit the US war state is in causing these problems. And
yeah, absolutely.
It seems like if you just again casually mention like the gravity of the situation, that you're exaggerating, but it's impossible to over exaggerate actually how horrible this shit is.
It really is.
Because once you get into the fucking details of it, it's just there's so many layers of absolute insanity that like no single person except for maybe Scott Horton could truly just encapsulate properly within within a couple of sentences or a paragraph or some shit. It's just this stuff is unfathomably horrible. It's unfathomably bad, and there's just again there's very little that we could say to overstate how fucking bad it is. And just one of these videos, just in one of these countries.
When I showed him a picture of Scott Horton before he'd watched anything, it was actually really funny. I showed him a picture of him. He said, "God damn!" He said, "Look at that guy. He knows some shit." And I said, "Dude, you have no idea. Like, even after just one video, like it is astounding. Like he knows. Yeah, that's putting it mildly. That dude knows some shit.
He's seen some shit." So yeah, let's see what he's got to say on Syria, because of course this is where ISIS gets involved, and we have a fun history with ISIS.
The story of the war in Syria really begins in Iraq in 2006. As we talked about in a previous episode of this series, Iraq War II ultimately was fought on behalf of Iran's favorite of the Shiite parties, the Dawa Party and the Supreme Council for Islamic Revolution in Iraq. Their armed Bada Brigade really became the Iraqi army. Well, that's not how it was supposed to work. America was supposed to have dominance over the Shia, and they were supposed to give America dominance over Iran. But by 2006, it was clear that this was not working out the way that they had hoped. Zalmay Khalilzad and others' administration, some think tankers like Stephen Biddle at the Council on Foreign Relations, recommended what Justin Raimondo called the Sunni turn. The best article about this is a 2007 piece by Seymour Hersh in the New Yorker magazine called The Redirection. And the idea was, again, we really did empower Iran by getting rid of Saddam Hussein and putting their best friends in power in Baghdad. So now we have to figure out a way to make it up to the Arabian Sunni kings. And it's in the WikiLeaks that Zalmay Khalilzad went to apologize to the king. And the king read him the Riot Act. It used to be us, you, and Saddam Hussein against Iran. Now you have given Iraq to Iran on a golden platter. And Khalilzad promised the king that we would make it up to him. And so that was when America started backing the Sunni tribes in western Iraq to marginalize the worst of the al-Qaeda guys there, while at the same time beginning to back al-Qaeda and bin Ladenite type forces, Fatah al-Islam in Lebanon, Muslim Brotherhood groups in Syria, and Jandala in Iran, as well as a Marxist Kurdish group, PJAK, the Iranian branch of the PKK in Turkey, and started supporting these groups to try to attack and hem in Iran. The redirection is truly the key to understanding American foreign policy in the Middle East in the post-Iraq War II era. Oops, we gave the Iranians friends Baghdad. We can't reverse that policy by starting that war and the sectarian cleansing campaign all over again from the other direction. So now we have to look for consolation prizes. And this is exactly the motivation that President Barack Obama explained to Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic magazine in the spring of 2012 for America's support for the uprising against Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Goldberg asks Obama, "Don't you think that getting rid of Bashar al-Assad in Syria would be a good way to weaken Iran?" And Obama said yes, and that's exactly what we're doing. Goldberg says he's still hanging on to power. Is there anything more that can be done to see to it that Assad is removed? And Obama says, well, I could tell you, Jeffrey, but you don't have a high enough security clearance. In other words, a less funny take on the old "I'd tell you, but I'd have to kill you" joke, implying that America had already begun covert action to overthrow Bashar al-Assad in Syria, which was true. It was
we can't have superpowers engaging in regime change in independent nations. That'd be fucking terrible.
Yeah, that would be bad.
And especially, and committing high treason to fund, known terrorist groups that were connected to the 9/11 attackers. I mean, what's the harm in that? Shit.
Reported in late 2011 that Obama had signed 2 findings authorizing enhanced covert action against Iran and Syria. We know from reports from the summer of 2011 that the Saudis were already sending jihadists. We know from reports from the late summer of 2011 that French special operations forces and spies were in their former colony of Syria, helping to organize resistance against the Assad regime there. And we know that Obama himself had authorized increased covert support by the end of the year. At the end of February 2012, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was interviewed by CBS News, and the CBS reporter asked her, from the position of the mainstream media consensus, why isn't America doing more to help to overthrow Bashar al-Assad in Syria? Well, Hillary was more hawkish than President Obama on the question at that time and later, but she was in the position of defending his policy. And so she made an extremely compelling argument to CBS News. She said, listen, we know that al-Qaeda is supporting the revolution in Syria. Are we backing al-Qaeda in Syria? Be generous. She wasn't talking about direct aid. She was just saying, listen, if a revolution and a regime change in Syria is what Ayman al-Zawahiri, the leader of al-Qaeda, wants, then are we sure that we want to participate in a policy that could very well empower al-Qaeda in this place? She knew exactly what she was doing, and this was the policy that she continued to support. Obama himself later told the New York Times' Thomas Friedman that the idea that there was somewhere in Syria an army of moderates, lawyers and doctors and pharmacists and teachers, who were going to be able to face down al-Qaeda.
The good old moderate rebels. Gotta love them moderate rebels.
On one side, and other Islamist groups like Ahrar al-Sham and Muslim Brotherhood groups, and at the same time take on the Syrian state and their allies in Hezbollah and Iran who had come to back them, was simply a fantasy. That was President Obama's words. So Hillary Clinton was warning. She's told CBS News, we don't see anyone prepared in Syria to take over the country. And yet they did it anyway. They launched an operation called Timber Sycamore, where they spent $1 billion a year backing this Al-Qaeda-led insurgency in Syria. It was also backed by our allies, the Turks, the Israelis, the Saudis, the Qataris, the Kuwaitis, and they poured billions of dollars and weapons into that country to help the jihadists fight. Now, most of the time, it's true, they had a somewhat deniable operation where they would have a less jihadist, more moderate type group that would promise to hold elections one day or something, would receive the bulk of the money and the guns. But in that war, all those things, of course, were fungible. And of course, the battle was led not by moderates at all, but by the extremists of the al-Nusra Front, which, as Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton's State Department were all too happy to verify and confirm for us, that the al-Nusra Front is nothing but an alias, their words, an alias for Al-Qaeda in Iraq, in Syria. When John McCain traveled to Syria in 2013, he met with some mythical moderates called the Northern Storm Brigade and took some pictures and posed with them and promised American support, which was delivered. But then it came out that this same group, the Northern Storm Brigade, were responsible for kidnapping and murdering a bunch of Lebanese Shiite pilgrims. They were the same group that
God, that guy, he keeps on popping up in photos with people. There's something to that, huh?
You know, you think at some point they would have at least been like, dude, McCain, you got to stop fucking taking pictures with these people.
It's like they're literally doing photo ops with these motherfuckers. And then you have, other fucking smooth brains being like, yeah, it's just a conspiracy theory that America was involved in the region. Like, what are you even talking about?
That's the exact photo that gets referenced in probably one of my all-time favorite Alex Jones clips. When Meghan McCain is talking about throwing
Okay, his dad is in hell.
People in Gitmo, yeah, and he hits her with it's her father famously photographed with the heads of ISIS, and now her father is in hell. And there's this like little slow trumpet like behind him, kind of over this whole. I fucking cried tears. I laughed
I love
so
that
hard
so
the first time I saw that clip. I played it like 5 or 6 times over. That was the funniest shit I had ever heard in my life.
It is honestly one of the funniest fucking video clips that I've seen.
He delivers that line perfectly. And now her father
who is now in hell. Yeah, that was brilliant, because if there is a hell, that motherfucker is there for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Later sold Steven Sotloff to ISIS, who cut his head off. Well, then there's the Al Farouk Brigade. They're pretty moderate. They said they wanted to hold elections and would respect freedom of speech and religion. Oh, here's some footage of their military commander eating a dead soldier's heart. But then there's Noor al-Zinki. Those guys are moderate. CIA gave them zillions of dollars worth of guns, tow missiles. Yeah, they're the ones filmed beheading a young man in the back of a pickup truck and laughing about it. These are essentially bin Ladenites, no different from the agenda of Al-Qaeda, and nothing moderate about them. There never was. The local Sunni tribal leaders and Ba'athis had marginalized Al-Qaeda in Iraq almost to a point of non-existence. They had named themselves the Islamic State of Iraq back in 2006 when their numbers were dwindling to the low hundreds. Al-Qaeda in Iraq was dead by the will of the local Iraqis, thank God. Then Obama comes and brought them right back to life. And they came in and created a massive battle space in Syria and fought this war. In the case of the war in Syria, there's no question that Bashar al-Assad has been ruthless and merciless in his prosecution of the war. But it's not a civil war. It's not a democratic uprising. More than any other thing, the fairest characterization of the war in Syria is that it is an invasion launched by jihadist mercenary forces backed by the United States of America, world superpower, and its allies, for their purposes, because they hate their strategic adversary in the region, Iran and its Shiite alliance, more than they hate Al-Qaeda, the butchers of New York City who've spilled innocent American blood. And so when it comes to the American establishment's point of view, at the top of the Republican and the Democratic parties, this is the way it has to be because they hate Iran more. Many of us warned in 2011, 2012, 2013 that Al-Qaeda is growing more and more powerful and that Western Iraq is wide open for the taking. By 2013, ISIS had split off from the al-Nusra Front. But this was really just essentially the Iraqi-dominated faction of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, splitting off from the Syrian-dominated faction of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, the Nusra Front, and also breaking off from the authority of Ayman al-Zawahiri, hiding out in Pakistan, bin Laden's former partner and the leader of Al-Qaeda by that time after bin Laden's death in 2011. By 2013, they had broken off from Al-Qaeda, and they were beginning to consolidate power in eastern Syria. This group, which had named itself the Islamic State of Iraq back in 2006, when they didn't control so much as a county seat anywhere, had the opportunity, as they were consolidating power in eastern Syria in 2013, to then take that fight into western Iraq. It later came out that the Defense Intelligence Agency under General Mike Flynn had put out a report in August of 2012 warning that that exact same thing was a likely possibility, that those creating an Islamic State in eastern Syria now could pose a major danger to western Iraq. Barack Obama's response was that ISIS was nothing but the junior varsity team, and no one needed to pay any attention to that. That was in January 2014. A few days.
Bro, did you read that?
Jesus Christ.
The analogy we use around here sometimes, and I think is accurate, is if a JV team puts on Lakers uniforms, that doesn't make them Kobe Bryant. What a fucking dick.
God damn.
What a fucking dick.
Into that. That was in January 2014. A few days later, they hoisted the black flag over Fallujah. 6 months later, they seized all of western Iraq and declared the caliphate.
They ain't Kobe Bryant.
Check out my writings at antiwar.com, my show at scotthorton.org, the Libertarian Institute at libertarianinstitute.org, and my books, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, and Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism, at enoughalreadybook.net.
Oh yeah, now we go on to more Iraq. Iraq isn't done yet.
Oh God, it never is.
All right, now we have to talk about Iraq War III. This is 2014 through 17. There was a real reason why the different jihadist forces who had joined together to form Al-Qaeda decided to target the United States in the first place. And there was a big argument about it inside their movement at the time. Should we try to create an Islamist caliphate now? Or should we listen to bin Laden and Zawahiri, who want to target the United States first? And the argument was that as long as America, the global superpower, was there to prop up the hated King Fahd in Saudi Arabia and the hated Hosni Mubarak in Egypt and the rest of the dictators around the region, then there was no point in attempting to wage a local revolution, since the Americans would come with their superior firepower and cancel it anyway. So their idea, again, was to lure America into taking advantage of the crisis that they created in our country, to get our government to exploit it, to destabilize the Middle East and prepare the battlefield for further revolution. The leaders of ISIS decided they didn't want to wait until the American empire had been broken and forced out the long way and the hard way.
So again, we can see from the people who we consider our enemies what their intentions are and what their strategies are. And they're like, listen, man, Osama bin Laden was trying to radicalize the Islamic world. And, the best way to do that is to get the U.S. Forces and policies and its allies to antagonize us so that our people have an enemy to radicalize against. And yeah, so I think it's very just fucking Oh, was this Omar bin Laden himself saying this? I think it's fair to conclude that the United States of America remains bin Laden's only indispensable ally.
Jesus.
Again, like this stuff. How the fuck is this not all common knowledge about the war on? Because, I mean, it's the answer is obvious, obviously, but it's just amazing that it isn't common knowledge and that sort of stuff. Because I mean, this stuff is applicable to be as anti-Bush as it is anti-Obama, and
Oh yeah.
even anti-Trump in a lot of ways. So I don't know. It's just wild to me.
To create their caliphate, they decided, hey, as long as America was essentially backing them in their war against Assad anyway, maybe now's the time to go ahead and seize the opportunity. The Islamic State, after breaking off from Al-Qaeda in the spring of 2013, then set about consolidating power in eastern Syria, creating a state. A year later, in June of 2014, they rolled right into western Iraq. Now, we've been warning about this on my show for a solid year. It was pretty obvious anyway. But Patrick Coburn had been in northwestern Iraqi Sunnistan in the spring of 2013 and came back and wrote for The Independent about how the Iraqi army, the Shiite army that George Bush had created and given Baghdad, was AWOL. And so they simply were retreating back behind Shiite lines. Critics who were paying attention to this knew better and were warning in the entire lead up to the seizure of western Iraq that it's wide open for the taking and that American support for the jihadists in Syria was in danger of blowing back into Iraq. And that's exactly what happened. In the month of June 2014, just days after Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi gave his big speech from the balcony at the mosque in Mosul, declaring himself the Caliph Ibrahim, ruler of the Islamic Caliphate, Israel's ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren, was videotaped at the Aspen Security Conference in conversation with the Atlantic magazine's Jeffrey Goldberg, where he explained that from Israel's point of view, in the war in Syria between, as he put it, the Shia evil and the Sunni evil, let the Sunni evil prevail. And Oren made clear that he was not referring to any mythical moderates. He made direct reference to the Islamic State's mass murder of 1,700 Iraqi Shiite Air Force cadets at Camp Speicher. From Israel's perspective, we prefer them to Assad. And why? Because, as he put it, Assad is backed by Iran. And now the Israelis did say that they didn't want to see a full regime change against Assad. They wanted to see both sides continue to hemorrhage to death, as one Israeli strategist told the New York Times. But for America, though, the Islamic State seizing all of western Iraq was a bridge too far. Barack Obama finally then, in August of 2014, launched Iraq War III, where again he put America on the side of the Supreme Islamic Council and the Dawa Party and the Badr Brigade, the Shiite Iraqi army, and all of their Iranian-backed militias, fighting for the same factions that they wish they hadn't fought for in Iraq War II, and only because their policy of attempting to make up for that error in Iraq War II had blown back so bad in the rise of bin Ladenites that the former fantasy of bin Laden and ridiculous propaganda of the Bush administration that the American people were threatened by an Islamo-fascist caliphate actually came true, and which has, of course, only empowered Iran and their allies' position in Iraq even more than before. In the fall of 2015, the Russian Air Force arrived and immediately started bombing the CIA's jihadists who were threatening Damascus. And at that point, the game was up. There's now famous audio that had been secretly recorded of then Secretary of State John Kerry talking with so-called moderate rebels meeting in Britain. Kerry and his aide are recorded explaining to these rebels our support for them was coming to an end. It hadn't worked, it wasn't going to work. And Kerry says, We saw the rise of ISIS. We thought we could manage. We thought that we could use them to pressure Assad to step down and have a transition of power. But he didn't do that. Instead, he went to Russia and asked for help. Something on the order of another 500,000 Syrians and Iraqis were killed in this catastrophe that completely failed to achieve its goal. And if you listen to the American hawks now, the reason that we can't go isn't because of ISIS, although sometimes they try to remember to bring that up. But mostly they're honest about it and say it's because of Iran. That Iran is now in a greater position of power in Syria, a greater position to arm Hezbollah and to threaten Israel. And so now American efforts in that war need to be stepped up again to prevent the results of their last two interventions. And that's why when Donald Trump announced in December of 2018 that America was finally going to leave Syria, that the Islamic State had been destroyed and our task there was done, his orders were essentially countermanded by the American military establishment, the Congress, and the media, who said, no, we just can't do that, and blatantly said repeatedly, because that will threaten Israel's security. So at the end of Iraq War III, we have to take stock. Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan had backed these terrorists back in the 1980s against the Soviet Union, but they ended up coming home and causing trouble, and including for the United States. Once George Bush exploited their attacks against America and invaded Iraq, they came in and thrived, and their numbers grew by the thousands and thousands during Iraq War II. Then when Iraq War II ended, many of the veterans of Al-Qaeda in Iraq went home to the countries where they were from, like Libya and Syria, and spread their jihad there. Then, as we've talked about, Obama almost inexplicably, just as he was killing Osama bin Laden, was taking his side and the side of his men in the wars in Libya and then in Syria. The war in Syria, which grew into the Islamic State and Iraq War III, has created literally thousands, maybe tens of thousands of bin Ladenite fighters, many of whom now are returning back to their countries where they came from. In each one of these policies, our government, which uses a bait and switch tactic to launch these wars in the name of protecting us from these bin Ladenite terrorists, have nothing but spread their campaign and their movement around the Middle East, Central Asia, and North Africa. They've destabilized nation after nation and paved the way for an actual bin Ladenite caliphate to come into existence for a full 3 years there in eastern Syria and western Iraq. And as we're about to see, they're not done yet. We've got one more war in Yemen.
Check out my writings at antiwar.com, my show at scotthorton.
But wait, there's more.
It makes the blood fucking boil. Like, you know, when you just, for decades, you give money to Sunni extremists to control the Iranian fucking friendly Shiites, and then it turns out that the fucking extremists also want to just be more independent than just opposing the Shiites in the region, but also maybe want the West out of their hair as well. And so the Shiites antagonize the West, become, you know, Al-Qaeda and the Bin Ladenites, and then we back fucking sorry, they were Sunnis, and then we back Shiite fucking you know, governments like in Iraq, which again, you know, has the effect of being friendly towards Iran. And then we're like, oh, we gotta fucking fight against them. Let's fucking, especially now that the terrorists who fought you know, fought in that war go off to their home countries. Now let's empower those terrorists who were, you know, Bin Ladenite, Al-Qaeda people who were loyal to Salman al-Waziri, and give those people money again. It's like this fucking merry-go-round of bullshit where it's just like, how the fuck is it not obvious how destructive all of this shit is? This, especially when you can point to, like, you know, fucking 5 years ago when it had the same exact fucking effect.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and
Absolutely.
millions
Yeah.
of people die in the process. It's like I said, it boils the fucking blood.
And then they just rinse, repeat over and
Mhm.
over and over and over and over.
Mhm. Oh, and fucking Yemen, absolutely
Yeah,
kills me.
man.
Yemen fucking kills me so much because it's just what's happening there is so horrible, and it's just such an outright outrage. I don't know. There's another way to put it. It's just so fucking obviously horrific,
Evil.
and
It's evil.
the fact that it's been just overlooked for so long. You fucking bring up Yemen to a normie. You're like, I'm angry at the government, and they're like, what are you angry about? And you go, Yemen, bro. Fucking Yemen. And they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Yemen, that's a funny word. Like, just, it's like, I couldn't point out Yemen on a map, and just, it's like, there are people there, and they're suffering so much. And we just need people to fucking pay attention to what's being done to them by our government, by Obama, by Trump, by Biden, by fucking, like, both sides of the aisle. Like, I don't give a shit where you fucking come from. You gotta recognize how fucking horrible this shit is. You have to recognize how fucking evil it is to be doing, like, the bombing of these water treatment facilities and these sanitation facilities during a cholera outbreak where all you need is clean water in order to survive. We're doing this to just fucking people who have nothing, they were the poorest in the Middle East before all this got started, and to just stamp them down into the dirt, when they were already having a fucking hard time, even like so far as, like, the world is considered, right? Like, okay, you can talk about, like, homeless crisis and all sorts of stuff happening in the US. But then you can also make the argument that it's relatively light compared to how some situations are abroad, because we have a standard of living where even shitty is still kind of okay compared to other places. That's not to say that we don't have people who are truly suffering of poverty, in poverty and that sort of stuff here as well. But relatively speaking, in comparison to world poverty, it's on the kind of upper end of where poverty is along the world. But Yemen is not. Yemen is poor globally speaking. And they were, again, before this war got started. And so it's just like if there was a systematically disadvantaged people in the world to care about and to consider worthy of outrage, it would be these fucking people. Yet it's such an unknown issue when you talk to fucking anybody in your daily life. You're like, hey man, what's going on in Yemen's horrible, right? And they're like, I'm sorry, what?
They don't even know what's happening. Yeah.
But yeah, let's find out.
God.
America's war on Yemen begins as part of the war on terrorism, one of the very few parts that was actually focused on attacking Al-Qaeda. In this case, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, the guys who had tried to bomb the USS Cole, the guys that had attempted to blow up a plane over Detroit on Christmas Day 2009 with the underpants bomb, who had done the laser printer cartridge explosives plot, which also had luckily failed. But they also were involved in some of the massacres in France. Barack Obama, when he came into power in 2009, decided he was going to launch a major CIA drone war to hunt down and kill these guys, primarily with Reaper drones. And he made a deal with Abdullah Saleh, who was a longtime American ally and dictator of Yemen, to allow for America to partake in this covert action war on his soil. And in exchange, Obama agreed to give Saleh money and weapons that Saleh then used to launch repeated attacks on a group of his political rivals in the north, a group of Zaidi Shia called the Houthis. And every time that Saleh attacked the Houthis, he lost and they won, and continued to beat back his forces and grow more and more powerful every time. It was a mirror image of the CIA's campaign against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula in the south of the country. Every time they dropped one of their 500-pound bombs, they would sometimes kill Al-Qaeda guys, but almost always would kill innocents too, if not only. And this continued to grow Al-Qaeda like watering a garden. The saying was that the drone war is like using a scalpel, but in reality, a 500-pound bomb is not a scalpel at all. It's a weapon of mass destruction if you're a civilian on the receiving end of it. And it backfired against our friendly government, helping make their enemies more powerful against them in the north of the country, while empowering the Al-Qaeda guys. And after the revolutions in Tunisia and Egypt, there were days of rage across the Middle East against America's sock puppet dictators and also against dictators that the Americans didn't control. One of the massive Arab Spring movements grew up in Yemen, and many different political factions organized together peacefully to protest in their version of Tahrir Square, the Pearl Roundabout, in order to demand the end of the Saleh regime. He held on to power until on the second bombing assassination attempt against him, he was wounded and was forced to go home to convalesce and heal from his wounds. And during that time, Saudi Arabia and Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama's Secretary of State, decided that they would go ahead and ease him out. The Saudis would withdraw their support for him and support the rise of his vice president, Hadi. They quickly held an election, literally with one man on the ballot, that Hillary Clinton hailed as the advent of Yemeni democracy and told the Yemeni people that they better like their new regime. At this point, all hell broke loose.
Did you see that bit at the bottom? Hold on. Look at President Ali Abdullah Saleh arrives in Yemen. A spokesman says Yemen's vice president gets 99.8% of the vote, an election official says.
Wow. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that always happens in elections. It's always just a wash. There's like one guy who votes against
99.8.
Regime. At this point, all hell broke loose because no one really supported Hadi at all other than Al-Islah, the Muslim Brotherhood group. He did not have the broad base of support that Saleh had been able to engineer before him. But then, when the former dictator Saleh healed from his injuries, he decided that you can't fire me, I quit, and took a major portion of his army with him. And in an important and major irony, it turned out that the former dictator Saleh was a Zaydi Shiite, just like the Houthis, his former enemies. And though he wasn't exactly a member of their political faction, he had plenty enough in common to then ally with them and with a major portion of the Yemeni army under his control, and then begin to march south and to take the capital city from his successor. By the end of 2014, beginning of 2015, the Houthis, the Zaydi Shiite group, had been successful in marching down and seizing the capital city and chasing Mansour Hadi out of the country down to the coastal city of Aden. At that time, the Wall Street Journal and Al Monitor both reported that Central Command had no problem with the Houthis. And if the Houthis wanted to help us fight against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, that was fine with them. And they were in fact furnishing the Houthis with intelligence to use against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula in January of 2015. Just 2 months later, Barack Obama stabbed the Houthis in the back and took Al-Qaeda's and Saudi Arabia's side in a brand new war against them. They called it Operation Decisive Storm. The New York Times has a fascinating story about the decision-making process in the Barack Obama government in the spring of 2015 when they gave the green light to the Saudis to launch this war and provided support for it. According to Obama administration officials, they knew when they debated their participation in the first place that this war would not be decisive, like in the name, that it would be, quote, long, bloody, and indecisive. In other words, they didn't know what victory should look like or how they could achieve it. And they launched it anyway. And they did so These officials told the New York Times to, quote, placate the Saudis. The Saudis, they were upset that the Obama administration was negotiating a nuclear deal with Iran. Now, you might think the Saudis, allegedly concerned about their security in the face of the Iranian nuclear threat, would be happy to see a massive new inspection regime. But in fact, the threat of the Iranian nuclear weapon was always a hoax and was never their concern any more than it was Israel's or America's. What the Saudis were really concerned about was that if America could put the nuclear issue to bed, that America might turn on them and start tilting back toward the Iranians like in the old days. And so they wanted to be reassured about their place in America's Middle Eastern order. Their entire military is built out of American equipment, is entirely dependent on American contractors and mercenaries for the entire care and feeding of their Air Force. They're incapable of launching their F-15s to Yemeni targets in the far west of that country without American Air Force Boeing refueling tankers, meeting them halfway and refueling their planes. And from the beginning, it's been admitted, reported in places like the Washington Post and the New York Times, that their favorite President Obama was continuing to back the Saudis, providing them with intelligence. And of course, the U.S. Navy has provided support for the Saudi Navy in enforcing a brutal blockade against the Yemenis, who were already the poorest population in the Middle East, with very few oil resources there. And due to previous World Bank and IMF gangsterization, they had been essentially forced, bribed, and coerced away from their sustenance crops like sorghum and millet and other grains, and convincing them to instead grow coffee and other cash crops. Welcome to the global marketplace. You can sell your coffee, make extra money, and then buy all kinds of foods from all around the world. It's the advent of international capitalism. It's wonderful until the American Navy puts you under a full blockade. They were cut off from international trade for years. Very much of what they did get from the international aid organizations, the private ones as well as the UN, would be rotten after being put through massive delays of so-called inspections and so forth. And that has created what is widely regarded as the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. And it has from the beginning been waged by the Saudis as a medieval siege campaign against the civilian population of the country. They've targeted from the very beginning the hospitals, the waterworks, the sewage, the electricity. This has caused a massive cholera outbreak with hundreds of thousands of victims, where the Saudis have then even went on to bomb the cholera hospitals where the children are being treated. And this is actually a disease that is very easy to treat with clean water and not even necessarily antibiotics. Oftentimes there's no clean water at all, and certainly no antibiotics to treat these children, who are then quite literally vomiting themselves to death. They've targeted the goats in the fields, the grain silos, the irrigation ditches, natural and artificial. They've done everything they can to destroy the basic structures of civilian life support in the country. All of it illegal by American law and international law as written by the United States.
At the end of 2017, Abdullah Saleh made his last mistake. He tried to make a secret deal with the Saudis to return him to power at the Houthis' expense. They turned around and killed him first.
The Americans and their friends have succeeded in getting nowhere, and the Houthis still control the capital city and are no closer to losing it now than they have been since the early months of the war, when they lost the port city of Aden. The lines haven't really changed since then, and yet the war continues. And the only reason it can continue is because of American military intelligence and diplomatic support and cover for the Saudi regime in waging this war. This war in Yemen that Barack Obama started and Donald Trump continued is at least as bad as Iraq War II. But this is one, since it is still continuing, it's not history yet. It's something that people can do something about. And due to the heroic work of lobbyists and activists in Washington, D.C., led by the Quakers Friends Committee, Just Foreign Policy, Code Pink, and other groups, the Congress has amazingly, miraculously been moved, the House and the Senate, to pass resolutions under the War Powers Act, on authorization bills. There's nothing more important right now.
As these videos were being finalized and published online in early February 2021, the Joe Biden administration announced that they were finally ending America's support for Saudi Arabia's 6-year war against the Houthi regime in Yemen. Now, they left a bit of a loophole. Biden announced that they would continue defensive support for Saudi Arabia, but in this case, I think that really does just mean more Patriot missiles, anti-drone technology, and so forth to prevent Houthi attacks inside Saudi Arabia. But the next day, Admiral Kirby at the Pentagon confirmed they were ceasing all resupply, maintenance, logistic, and intelligence support for the Saudi effort. The UK's support for the Saudi air war and the US Navy's support for their blockade are two issues that seemingly remain unresolved, and activists will have to keep our pressure up on the Biden administration to follow through and really seek an end to this war, not just American support for it. They also announced that they were removing the Houthis from the terrorist list, where Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had placed them in the last days of the Trump administration, a move which had pretty much outlawed the international organizations providing food aid to the starving population there. So that was a very important move as well. They did also announce the appointment of a new envoy, a guy named Lender King, whose job it will supposedly be to negotiate an end to this war. This seems to be a real improvement over the last 6 years of genocide and treason, but it's really not an end to the war. They're just switching sides, again. Probably not back to the Houthis, but certainly the war against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, now far more powerful than ever before, is scheduled to continue indefinitely. Check out my...
Yeah, and as we mentioned last week, there has been a ceasefire that I think has been in effect for like 2 months now. And at the moment, it seems to be holding up and seems to be maintaining. So that is a bit of a respite. And I believe the blockade has been eased up as well now that the ceasefire is in effect. So that was one thing that was just like a horrifically enraging, is like the fact that it's like not only is the U.S. like all the U.S. had to do was stop changing the tires on the fucking planes, because these are like these planes need to be like the tires need to be replaced either after every flight or like pretty close to after every flight. And so, you know, they could bomb once or twice and then literally would need new tires, and all the U.S. had to do is not change those tires, and the genocide would stop. And it also, if they didn't, you know, prevent international trade from entering the country, that would also, you know, greatly help out the people. Like, there's so many things that the U.S. was directly involved with and directly responsible for in terms of making life for these absolutely impoverished people just all the more worse. And it was fucking wild. And I'm glad that it was actually, it's now on the downswing, and hopefully we can see it resolve more.
Hopefully
But
it continues.
But you know, yeah, how I don't know if Saudi is going to stay like neutral on this topic, or if they're going to want to you know, push for more antagonism again. What they're because the thing is, it's not like we've stopped being allied with Saudi and Israel, right? Like they still you know, they're still very much an influence in how we conduct ourselves in the Middle East right now. And so if you know, this ceasefire happens, it's great. If we truly commit to not, you know, exacerbating these horrible crises, great. But are we still, you know, going to allow Saudi and Israel to influence our decisions and our you know, policies in those regions? Because it's not been working. You know, it's been fucking them and us for decades, and that's the change that I really want. You know, some a turnaround and a ceasefire and backing off from doing one of the most horrible things that could possibly be done in the history of the world. Sure, that's a great start, But let's examine how we even got to be in that situation to begin with, and hopefully maybe turn that policy around. Please?
Oh yeah, right. God, it's just the amount of damage that's already been done though is just devastating. Like that's it's just insane.
Yeah, the damage and to the targets that it hit, you know, the most vulnerable, the most destitute and impoverished and vulnerable. Yeah. And so like these were the people who were the most drastically hit, and we just not only allowed it but enabled it. And it's like, and then, you know, I don't know, people expect us to just not, it's like, oh, you just hate America and you just hate you know, just want to, you know, criticize the government, you know, for any reason whatsoever. It's like, no, I think war is actually bad though. You know, I'm pretty confident that
Yeah,
that's
there are
probably.
some pretty specific reasons. There's a lot of specific reasons that we can point at. We're not just, you know, your average internet fucking commie that's like, hey, fucking America, because kept like there's very specific actions and like repeated. We have a pattern of doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the same people and the same fucking actions and the same goddamn playbook over and over and over and over again. And it's like you can't. There's absolutely no excuse for it. There's none. There's no excuse for it. We know what's going to happen because we've done it before. We do it on purpose, and then we kill thousands of people every single time we do it. Like it's a fucking game. Like these are just, you know, they're just numbers.
Yeah, and it's like, how many times do we have to teach you this lesson? Yeah, how many times do you have to learn this lesson? It's just, it's fucking nuts, and it's just, and I feel like it should be a pretty simple one for most normies to empathize with and to get behind and to understand the outrage that we have, because it's pretty fucking obvious and pretty, I would say, universally valued, you know, in this sort of way. It's just that it's just not something that's penetrated the normal you know, population's just understanding, or just, you know, what they think about on a daily basis. They have kind of a vague sense of like wars being bad, and that like maybe Bush was kind of, you know, doing some funny shit with the war on terror and being, you know, anti-Islamic or something. But like it just, after Obama, it seems that everybody just fucking let it fly out of their consciousness. And then like it was brought up a couple times when Trump was president, when they could criticize him, they're like, well, you know, if he gets out of Iraq, then he's abandoning the Kurds and the KPP to, you know, they're gonna die and stuff. I'm like, you just learned about the Kurds a month ago. I fucking know you did, because there's fuck. I don't believe that you gave a shit about the Kurds before the TV told you to give a shit about them. I knew about the Kurds. I know what was happening there. They were, of course, they were being set up to fucking fail. They were armed, and then they, like, just like all the fucking factions there, they were armed, and then it became politically inconvenient. So then their enemies were armed instead, and then it fucking went back and forth a couple, like. Dude, this is what I've been fucking. Don't tell me that like now Trump is bad for the Kurds. Like, oh my god, it's just so frustrating. It's just like this is a TV thing. This is just a TV line. Like, you fucking, like, tell me more about the Kurds. Come on, like, other than this one thing that like Trump is doing about, like, fuck, man, it's just so fucking frustrating. But at the same time, it's just like, how is it that, like, yeah, they get these little snippets of like, oh, this is bad because of Bush, and this is bad because of Trump, but it's just like, no, the whole fucking thing has been rotten from the fucking core, and it doesn't matter what the letter in front of the guy's name is. Like, it's the war state. It always has been. And I used to think that, like, being like, people were anti-war. They used to be.
It used to be.
it seemed like a big fucking deal at some point. He has one little 4 minutes on just like kind of wrapping stuff up. So yeah, take a look here.
Yeah, man.
Our government created this enemy, provoked it to turn on us, exploited its violence to excuse far worse in nation after nation throughout the Middle East, spreading their bin Ladenite terrorism as well as the influence of Al Qaeda and America's enemies in Iran. And yet they continue to insist that we persist and allow them to continue these wars. They won't even let us get out of Afghanistan on the far side of Iran from anywhere that matters. And yet once they have a base, they'll never let go. So far, it's estimated that the US government has spent $6 trillion on this war. They've killed hundreds of thousands, quite possibly more than 1 million people in the various wars: Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Somalia. Maybe more than 2. Approximately 7,000 American soldiers have been killed. 4,500 of them in Iraq, almost 2,500 of them in Afghanistan.
Suicide rates for American soldiers consistently outpace the general population, including now more than 9,000 veterans of Iraq War II and Afghanistan.
And the American economy suffers so terribly, not just from inflation, but from the artificial booms that are caused by our government's monetary policy,
which holds interest rates artificially low
to make the economy feel prosperous, to make the wars seem free. And then the cost is paid in the terrible busts and crashes that happen every 10 years or so.
Hey, that's Tom Wood's book that I mentioned.
Our share of the war in time spent in the unemployment line, or worse, in the grave, when you look at the epidemic of suicides, drug abuse, and terrible societal dislocation that has happened because of the economic crisis that has happened because of the war on terrorism that our government has waged. If it's up to them, they will cannibalize every last life and every last cent in this country for their own sake. They're not our security force. They do not protect us. They've shown time and again that they prefer our enemies, which they've created for us in the first place, Al Qaeda, who have shed innocent American blood, to their strategic rivals in the region, Iran, a region that America has no right to dominate in the first place. The whole war on terrorism essentially amounts to a hoax, a permanent war against our government's enemies at the American people and countless innocent other people's expense. The American people could seize this opportunity to force America's corrupt imperialist foreign policy to the top of the agenda and demand an end. The people must let the national security state know we don't believe in them anymore. We don't believe in their terror war, and we demand, for our sake, for our soldiers' sake, for the sake of the lives of the people of the Middle East, that the war on terrorism be brought to an end immediately and for all time.
Check out my writings at antiwar.com, my show at scotthorton.org, the Libertarian Institute at libertarianinstitute.org, and my books, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, and Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism, at enoughalreadybook.net.
And yes, these came out in February of 2021. So that was a couple of months before Biden's fucking horrendous failure in withdrawing from Afghanistan, and obviously well before the Ukraine issue. But yeah, he's got plenty of. I mean, obviously we saw his speech on Ukraine. He's got plenty of good content going over. He got a good interviews on Ukraine as well on the Scott Horton show. One that I definitely want to check out maybe next time will be this debate. I know I've mentioned it a couple times already with Warhawk Bill Kristol.
Bill Kristol, yeah.
And so it's a fun one because he just absolutely smacks the shit out of. It's just fantastic. And yeah, it's a fun one to watch. It's even though he's talking about horrible shit, but just to watch how terrible these hawks are actually are at rationally defending their interests and their policies. It's truly it's a sight to behold, because I mean you knew it was paper thin to begin with, but
Right.
it's just so transparent when you watch a real live guy who professes, you know, that like the US is doing good in terms of like nation building abroad, and that it should be doing that sort of stuff, to see how terrible he is at actually defending these ideas, and how full of just slogans and platitudes his whole the whole structure of his belief system is actually built upon. It's yeah, just like I said, it's entertaining, it's a sight to behold, and it's kind of refreshing and reinforcing that it's like, you know, that you're on the right side when it comes to this shit. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, I knew the guys promoting war were doing for bullshit reasons, but like it's fucking clear when the dude gets up here and spews those reasons, and they just fucking suck. And
They
then
just fall apart. Yeah.
and somebody like Scott Horton just fucking smacks the shit out of him, you know, back and forth along the stage. He does it because they have like you know, it was more formal debate in terms of like they had you know, a certain amount of time to give like their position. Each one gets like opening arguments, and then they get a rebuttal to the opening arguments again, uninterrupted, and then there's like sort of like Q&A or like back and forth sort of session at the end of it. And so yeah, it's good stuff. We should check it out next time. And yeah, we'll get more current event stuff and articles, and then we'll finish off with that if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm down. Yeah, I'd be really interested to watch that video in particular. Yeah, yeah. Sounds good to me.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I think that'll do it for tonight. We did a good 3 hours here, and it was actually on YouTube this time, which is good. And yeah, it was fun. I hope you have a good week. You know, your buddy enjoys more of these videos. Checks them out, because yeah, I think they're important for people to watch, to really understand like this shit is deep. You know, it is. There's a lot of stuff here, and
There really is.
way worse than
It's-
anybody can possibly imagine from the outset, from getting started with it.
Well, also, you know, it makes a lot of sense too. Why, you know, you start you ask like, how can all this happen? Like your average person doesn't even know there's just, I feel like there's so much you can't see you know, you can't see the forest through the trees. There's just so much of it.
And it's difficult to
so-
follow because it involves like
Right.
one, so many little like regional sects of people, right? And you have to know like, okay, what are the fucking Sunnis and Shiites, and who are the Sunnis and who are the Shiites? So Al-Qaeda's the Sunnis, and then the Iraqi government and the pro-Iranians are the Shiites. Okay, and then so we've been funding both of them at different points, and even at the same time in different areas, right? We're like funding the Ladenite Al-Qaeda fucking Sunnis in certain places, and then we're backing the people who are fighting them in other places, and it's just so convoluted and changes so often from year to year. And it's understandable that some fucking guy in like Connecticut or Ohio or some shit is not gonna, you know, have his like finger on the pulse of the different, you know, factions in goddamn Pakistan that are that are being exploited. And so yeah, it's solely understandable that like people got other shit to worry about in there. But it's just like, also, I mean, the fucking government's doing it, man. It's important. It has to be addressed. It can't just be ignored, because like people are thinking that they got to vote over like, you know, I don't know, voter ID laws or abortion laws or, you know, this stuff. And, you know, there's like hundreds of thousands of people that are dying in the most horrible fucking ways, and living in like, just, you see the rubble of the rubble of those like bombed out houses. It's like entire cities, and people are just sleeping on rocks and shit and unable to get clean water. It's
because I mean, they really have nowhere else to go. Like, yeah, their home got bombed, but like, where the fuck else are they gonna go? They just keep living there.
Isn't it like they can be like put up like in a hotel or some shit, or you know, like the local Motel 6. You know, it's not like even if like, you know, like the Motel 6 was like, oh, you know, you just had Katrina, like, well, you can stay here for free. It's like there's no spot for that, you know. And it's just, yeah, it's clearly very fucking important and very, very. It's something that we're deeply involved in as a nation, right? I say we in the the sense it's like we live in this fucking country, and so if people are going to be concerned about something going on in government, it's like human rights, like war crimes seems to be like something that should be important. It seems so stupid to say, man. Like war crimes should be, people should care about war crimes. Like maybe like if a guy helped commit war crimes, we should not like that politician.
We should stop. Yeah, we should stop.
I know.
Continually
I know I'm being stunning and brave by saying that we should not like politicians who commit war crimes. It's a wild concept. Just maybe we shouldn't stand the war crimers. But yeah, that's all we got for today. If anybody can stop by, thank you very much. Appreciate you. Probably people watching after the fact too. Love you. Love you so much. Yeah, but see ya. I'll see you, Hominis, as well. Gonna end it here. Say goodbye to